fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and the D's blew their chance to book a home preliminary final, and now we must take solace in some successful finals campaigns of the past, such as the Lions in 03, the Swans in 05, the Eagles in 06, and the Hawks in 15, who all failed at the first hurdle, only to pick themselves off the floor, dust themselves off, and then fight their way back to the ultimate glory on that one day in September. Joining me tonight to dissect the loss against the Pies on Thursday night is longtime Demonlander George. Good evening, George.
Good evening to Andy. Good evening to our Demonland listeners. Good evening to Ben Man. Well, for all of us who are feeling a little bit down, we actually do have the answers tonight, but you'll just have to keep listening and find out.
Okay, I look forward to it. Also joining us tonight to help make...
I'm looking forward to those answers too.
Yeah, also joining us tonight to help us make sense of the loss and to tell us how we're going to dust ourselves off and get back on the winners list is B-Man. Good evening, B-Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demonlanders. And the forecast for Friday is warm and 25 degrees. The MFCSS in Andy would think, well, that will just mean the dew will kick in at 7 a.m.
That's exactly what I was
p.m.
thinking. Exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, well, opportunity is that you get your double chance and you might as well take it, I reckon. So I was thinking on a reframe, as you're spot on, Andy, 25% of, since the Final 8 came in 2000, 25% of flag winners have lost their qualifying final. So the damn good odds. So we get to watch another game in Melbourne. So all good. Then we'll go up to Brisbane and win up there, and we get to play the Giants on the big dance in the last day in September.
See, we're already feeling better, aren't we?
I'm not. So... You're going to have a lot more work to do.
Keep hanging in there, Andy. You'll be right by the end of the program.
Well, I think I'm really down on a low, and we'll talk about the mood in a second, but it was probably because I tipped us to win last week. So
I warned you. I did warn you, Andy.
It's a long way down from the top.
Yeah, you should have just said, no, we've got no chance of winning. And, I mean, that's the thing about hope. It springs eternal, but then gets poisoned in the well and off you go. So, but we get to go again this Friday.
Well, my well is well and truly poisoned. So let's get on with the show. We've got a lot to do. Each week I ask our loyal listeners to help us out by leaving us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcast. And we just love the feedback, and we do read it out on the show. The 5 stars help boost the podcast. It gets more listeners to the show and then brings more listeners over to Demonland, and therefore we can get more contributions and more voices onto the show from, via the questions and comments from our audience. So the best way you can help us out is, boost the podcast in the form of these reviews, or you can just help spread the word to your Demon family members and friends. Demonlander Engorged Onion writes us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts saying, "Orgasmic essentialism for Demon fans. Exceptional. Every episode embodies excellence. Observations offer outstanding enlightenment. Essential for enthusiasts. Onwards, Demonland." Thank you, Engorged Onion, for that review. Another prolific Demonlander helping us out by writing a review. All the way from the USA, Demon Ted writes us a review saying, "I live in the States and the only Demons conversation I have is with my son in Amsterdam, usually at 2:30 in the morning when the games are on here. I love the analysis provided by the boys, and it gives me a great Demons fix every week in a country bereft of any watchable sport. Been following the Demons for over 60 years, so it's hard to be so far away from the action. Thanks, guys. You fill a big hole in my life." Well, thank you, Ted. Appreciate the review, and I'm glad that we can provide you with some Demons content. And then from the US, across the pond to the UK, we have 2 quick reviews. Dan writes, "Essential escape for diehard Ds, a great podcast to escape the rubbish of footy media. The fellas provide great analysis and conjecture about all things Melbourne, have been listening since our 21 grand final victory and haven't missed an episode since. Thanks, Dan. And then Callum writes, being a Demons fan in England, it isn't easy, especially as I am the rare breed who follows the AFL with no ties to Australia at all. However, listening to the Demonland podcast each week certainly helps fill the void. Andy, George and Bin Man clearly love the club, and their informative discussions definitely are great listens on my various long and boring commutes on the London Underground. I highly recommend to any Demon fans wherever they may be in the world, and hopefully there'll be another Premiership episode to listen to soon. Callum, who is British Demon fan on Demonland. So how good is that? A Demon fan overseas who isn't an expat or has any ties to Australia, and he's a Demonlander to boot. So a rare breed indeed. Thank you, Callum. Appreciate the review. So keep the feedback coming. Give us that 5-star on Apple Podcasts, and don't forget to click the write a review link and write that review as well as the 5 stars. We'll read it out on the show. If you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter or Threads, and you want to leave us feedback or post a comment or a question for the show, you can post under our podcast post each week or just slide into our DMs. We will not read out your full name on the show. And in addition to being available on Apple, Google, Spotify, SoundCloud, and all your preferred podcasting apps, the Demonland Podcast is available to be watched and listened to on YouTube. Just search for Demonland Podcast and find our channel. Give us a like, give our videos a like, and subscribe to the channel. If you want to chat with other Demons fans and you've never been over to the forum, head on over to demonland.com. Sign up. You can chat with other Demons fans from across Australia and around the world. If you'd like to join us on the air tonight to talk about any of the topics we're going to talk about, please give us a call on 03 9016 3666. That's 03 9016 3666. I'll answer, put you on mute, bring you on when there is a break in the conversation. If you want to leave us a voicemail during the week, call that number and we'll play it on the show. So if you're listening live now, you can join us in the chat room. Head on over to demonland.com/podcast. We are live every Monday, so if you want to listen to the show live, head on over to demonland.com on Monday nights at 8:30 p.m. That is. Let's get into the match wrap-up. We've all read the script to this B-grade movie a number of times in 2023. The poor starts, poor inside 50 connection and equally poor kicking for goal has been a staple of this season, and this time it did cost us a home preliminary finals berth. The Pies came to the MCG ready to play, and they were much hungrier than the Ds and had a fire in their belly. They were the first to the ball, and when they weren't, they brought the heat and the pressure and the physicality. And it was no surprise that Mason Cox really set the tone for the evening, crashing into Max at the very first bounce and then at every contest after that. Braden Maynard turned up the physical heat even further when he poleaxed Angus Brayshaw, ending the night as he was stretchered off the field, throwing a spanner in the D's forward and midfield setups with Track being forced into the centre. And we do wish Gus all the best. And after yet another slow start by the Demons, highlighted by being 10 contested possessions in arrears, they went into the quarter-time break with a 3-goal deficit, which might have been more had the Pies converted a few easy set shots. The Ds, for their part, could only manage the 1 goal for the quarter from that downfield free kick. The Ds began to turn things around in the second quarter, but still could only manage a single goal for the quarter, bringing its total for the half to 2 goals, despite having more than double the Pies' entries inside 50. Poor conversion, as I said, was the story of the night. Poor conversion inside 50, poor conversion in front of the big sticks, and it's, as I said, it's a recurrent theme for much of the year. Despite the Ds winning most of the stats after quarter time, we could not convert any of that into scoreboard pressure, and Bidman expected score be damned. 7 goals, 11 for the night, including a number of balls that went out on the full, could have been the difference in the end. The Ds had 3 more scoring shots from 22 more inside 50s. We simply have to clean up our conversion rate in both these areas. It was all the Ds in the final quarter, booting 3 and holding the Pies to 2 points, but it was all too little too late and not enough, and the chance for a week's rest and home final were blown. After being beaten in the match, early in the match, Max Gawn stood tall, finishing with 31 hit-outs and 27 disposals, an unbelievable 22 contested possessions, 7 marks and 10 clearances. Clayton Oliver was simply outstanding with 31 possessions, 16 contested, 10 tackles, and an absolutely incredible 742 metres gained. And despite conceding 4 first-quarter goals, which were mostly the result of turnovers and quick entries forward, our defence was magnificent, holding the Pies to just 5 goals for the rest of the game. All of May, Lever and Bowie had 9 intercept possessions, whilst the retiring Hibbard kept Jamie Elliott to just 2 points. Once again, it was an opposition small forward who was our kryptonite, with Bobby Hill breaking free on a number of occasions and using his speed to boot 3 goals. Probably the difference in the end. So we're in sudden death territory, facing the Blues at the G, whose crowd will be up and about and just as loud as the feral Pie fans were. Will 2023 be a repeat of 2022 with the Ds being bundled out in straight sets, or can we right the ship and down the Blues and then set sail for Brisbane? Before I get some brief thoughts from you guys from the match, let's take a bit of the temperature of the room. We've got a couple of questions or comments from Demonlanders. D32 says, no question, just wish the podcast could be brought forward a couple of days. The MFCSS is biting hard after that loss with no Gus, no Roo, A, B, C and D options taken from the forward line. Needs some positive binners and George insights to bring the mood back up. Didn't want to hear from me, obviously. El Diablo 14 says, Andy, we need a cathartic session to keep hopes high before next Friday. I'm feeling hopeless, and awaiting another straight sets exit. Please tell us we can still make it. Well, I think you're barking up the wrong tree, seeking any solace from me. I'm almost resigned to that straight sets exit now. The loss, it was deflating. I recognise that we did outplay the Pies for almost 3/4 of this match, but our slow starts, the lack of forward 50 connection, and then our inability to convert, which we'll talk about more in depth later, it was just deflating. And I know we can beat anyone on our day, but perhaps my co-hosts can be the ones to provide you with that succor that you need to give you that hope that we can bounce back. So, well, B-Man, can you provide some hope without getting into too much details, because we've got lots of questions to talk about.
Well, I mean, I like a bit of perspective, really. I mean, I'm obviously gutted, as I said last week. One of the one of the challenges of being super confident going into a match is the outcome of a match. But none of us thought that we were going to thrash the Pies. Everyone, the three of us and all Melbourne fans rate the Pies. I think we're a better team. They just beat us, but they were the premiership favourites going into that match. They are the premiership favourites now. As you just said, we should have beaten them on expected score. We should have won that match. We're $1.67 to beat the Blues this week. We're $7 to win the flag. Port, who get to play at home, are $10 to win the flag. If you take off your red and blue glasses and sort of take some of the emotion out of the loss, is that, as you mentioned at the top, it is not uncommon. 25% of teams since 2000 who have gone on to win the flag have lost their qualifying final. So, that's why you spend a whole season to finish top four, for exactly this reason, as protection. Collingwood haven't got that anymore. They go through to the prelim, and that's what we wanted. The other factor I think that really, and I'll get into this in a bit more detail, is that last week when we were doing Salty's ratings, George and I both had 8 out of 10 on Salty's confidence levels. You were 6.5. But Andy, if I was to say to you at that point last week, all right, so you're 6.5, how do you feel? Where would your rating be if we lost Gus within 3 minutes of the match starting? You would have, I don't know what you would have said, but you would have said 3 or 4. So the fact, it's just, that's one of the funny things. I haven't listened to any of the commentary. I'm so furious about, the funny thing is I didn't really mind about listening to commentary about the match because I could guess what it was all going to be, which is this nonsense about connection and forward, blah, blah, blah. I saw a headline on the AFL.com that we've been worked out. We've been playing the same way for a long time. There's nothing to work out. What I would be curious to know is any commentators saying, well, you lose one of your best players. He's been in our top 5 rating players for the last 6 or 7 weeks. He's been in our top 5 pressure rating players for the last 6 or 7 weeks. If you said to me last week, Bin Man, so your rating's 8, that's your confidence level on the Salty scale. How about where would your rating be or your feeling confidence levels be if I was to tell you were going to lose one of your top 5 players, Gus of all ones, players within the first 3 minutes of the match? I would have said, well, let's take a betting perspective. I would have said we were $1.90 equal favourites to win that match. Well, as soon as Gus went down, we were $2.50, $2.60, honestly. That is a massive out. So, I'm confident we'll win this week. As much as will be the psychological aspect and whether we can turn it around. And I've got full confidence that we'll be able to do so. But, yeah, it was I found it a really struggle to watch the match after Gus went down, to be honest. It was a sickening blow, and it really took the air out of the game for me. And so I'm sure it did for the players. So our first quarter, I'll talk about this in more detail, was so anomalous. Like that first quarter was a bizarre first quarter on all of the numbers. Like you can barely believe it. Like just one was they were 55% inside 50 and we were 45% inside 50. And yet we were able to get within 7 points at the match. We basically gave them 1 quarter of footy. So we only played 3 quarters of footy and still almost got over the top of the flag favourites. So there's a huge amount to be confident about going forward if you're objective. But obviously it stings like all get out to have lost on Thursday night. But let's, focus on our opportunity as we go forward. And I really hope we get another chance to play Collingwood and roll them again.
George, how's your mood?
Mood. Obviously very disappointed like every other Demon fan because we should have won that game. The opportunities were there. We know the reasons. You've got to kick goals to win matches, and we gave them, like Bin Man just said, a full quarter of football, basically, and we were chasing the tails for the rest of the game. We nearly got there. And again, we shouldn't forget that it was 4 points the difference at the King's birthday game. It's 7 points in this game. They're the top of the ladder side. They're a good side. We are too, but don't forget that we're in the same bracket as them. It was always going to be a hot contested game. That's what the coach has been reminding us about all seasons. Finals football is very different from the way football's played during the 22 odd rounds during the season. This was just hot contested. They were slightly better than us. We helped them out by not kicking straight and efficiently. But all around the ground, it was just one-on-one, contest, and they beat us by 7 points. I'd love to have been playing Port Adelaide in this preliminary final. In this final instead of Collingwood. But I still think that we're as good as Collingwood are, and if we do meet them in the grand final, it'll be the same again. It'll be a close match, a very tight match, and we should win out this time, providing we can kick straight, and hopefully we've got a forward line that sort of functions, or people don't get injured between now and then.
All right, let's get into the stats and find out. So hopefully some information that might buoy us, but it might deflate us.
I think we're going to need some sort of intervention with Andy. He's like, I think he's actually, I can feel the anger towards you and I, George. It's like, we've convinced him to be confident to go into a match. See what happens? His heart's broken. If he'd built a wall around it, there'd be no pain whatsoever. It would have been what he expected. So
trust me. This is the usual problem, isn't it? That we're the problem, not him.
Come on, Andy.
Trust me.
Open up your heart to more pain this Friday night. We can go all the way.
Believe me, if we lose to Carlton, they're my nemesis. As I've said on many occasions, all my mates growing up and still my mates now are all Carlton supporters. So losing to them, going out in straight sets to them would be worse than any other loss.
But conversely, beating them and popping the Blues bubble will give you joy. Even if we don't go on to win the flag, you'll have that joy. So just focus on the joy you'll get.
Let's see in a week's time
by beating the Blues, and you'll have that over your Blues friends. So this week on the stats file, I thought I'd do a little bit differently and focus on what I think were the top 5 reasons we lost, or the Pies won, depending on your perspective. And I reckon that's relevant because a fair bit of the chatter on Demonland, which is the only media or the only information I've read about the game, to be honest, I haven't been able to bring myself to watch anything but the highlights, the mini KO highlights or whatever for this match. But there's been a lot of focus on this sort of suggestion that we lost the game. And I mean, with all of the numbers and our accuracy, that's, it's that's a reasonable point, but I think there's a danger in underestimating how well the Pies played. I mean, they really played brilliantly. In particular, as I suggested last week, was going to be a huge factor. Quaynor, not so much Murphy, but Quaynor and Moore were just brilliant. Credit where it's due to the Pies. Actually, and I'll get into this a bit later, I thought McRae had a really good night in the coaching box. I've got a question for George around, around them allowing us our method, but we'll get on that later. But I really wanted to highlight that I thought the Pies played brilliantly, and the other player I thought who was magnificent for them and caused us real problems, and showed up, to be honest, some of McVee's inexperience. Was Bobby Hill. I thought he was just terrific, and his pace was a huge concern for us. So the top 5 reasons we lost, counting backwards, so counting, the fifth, I thought number 1 was Gus going down was an absolutely massive factor. Now, how big a factor, it's hard to quantify. So, it could even be higher on the list than 5. There's clear, I wonder what the psychological impact was on the team, at least for that quarter. I felt sick watching it, and I just felt sick all through the match. And I can't imagine how his teammates would have been feeling seeing Gus, of all players, go down with that brutal, that obvious. He was cold he was out before he hit the ground. And there's a photo that I saw today on Demonland of Oliver looking down on or touching him, Gus. And it almost brings tears to my eyes just thinking of it, just how white. Oliver looks white in the face. And I heard Track interviewed, and he was clearly distressed still 2 days later. And so that's the impact from a psychological. So what impact does that have on the stats? Well, apart from the fact that, as I said, he's also been in great form and built from these sorts of games. From a statistical point of view, it was a massive problem having Gus out. He does a huge amount of defensive running and gets to a huge amount of contests, and I'll talk about this in a bit more detail in a sec. But those actions are picked up in the team pressure ratings, which are off. They smashed us for pressure through the match. We were essentially down one of our key midfield rotations that we needed to cover for an entire game of footy. That in turn meant we couldn't put Track forward as much, which might have helped our ability to turn some of those entries into a goal, certainly as much as we would have planned to. And I have a sort of comment about that in terms of I still reckon they might have done that. It brought Laurie into the game really early, and you have to say he struggled with the tempo, and he didn't really have much impact through the match, and we couldn't use him as we'd wanted to inject run and skill late in the third. But the pressure factor gives a sense of how much pressure is applied. So it's a bit of a misnomer. Again, I'll talk about it in more detail in a sec. I don't think we closed down space enough right through the game, and I think a big reason for that was losing Gus, which robbed us of one of our key players with the gut running he does to apply pressure. And as I said, it knocked out one of our key midfield rotations, which critically impacted our all-team defence and ability to cover and close down space. And I'll talk about what that means statistically in a sec. So together, with Gus, it really impacted our pressure rating numbers and our defence, all-team defence, and our ability just to transition the ball ourselves and the ability to defend on transition. So the fourth factor, or the fourth most, was our team pressure. It was 180 in the first quarter to their 194, 172 in the second quarter to their 177, 182 in the third to their 205 in the third. And they were brilliant in that third quarter. They really, I thought, brutalised us in some respects. A lot of contests they applied a lot of pressure, 176 to 192 in the last quarter for an overall pressure rating of 178, 192. They're it's a bit misleading, the term pressure. It's called pressure factor. Pressure means different things to different people. But so few, for instance, would think of corralling as applying pressure, for example, but they call it a pressure factor. So it's probably better to call it that. So I'll call it that. But there's a big difference between points for closing. You get 2.25 for closing, which is you're so close that you've impacted their ability to dispose of the ball, and corralling and chasing, where you're standing off the player. And closing is a higher degree, as I said, of pressure than corralling, where the pressure player's on the verge of making contact with the ball carrier and the pressure player's forcing the ball carrier to dispose of it immediately. So they chased a bit harder, they closed space a bit harder, they turned corrals into closing, so they turned it over. For me, that's work rate. And so in some ways, that pressure factor is a better measure of work rate than pressure. So, for example, if players aren't gut running when chasing, it shows up in the pressure factor because they only get 1.5 points for chasing rather than the 2.5 they get if they get close enough to force a rush disposal. And in that first quarter in particular, a lot of our entries into our forward line, which were rightly criticised, for me, it was that pressure the Pies were able to put on late on the kick, and it forced us to. They really hurt us in that first quarter with their turnover marks. Even Cameron got back and was taking marks back there. But a lot of that was to do with our depth kicking. We were just kicking poorly to advantage. We weren't giving our forwards any opportunity. We're kicking it to the defenders' advantage. In the first quarter, the pressure was higher because they won more contested balls, and as I said, I suspect they turned more chasers in the closing act. Not having Gus was huge because of that, because he closing, corralling, chasing, tackling there, he's one woods. That's what he does best, and he has the fitness to do it. Laurie was only on the ground 50% of the time and never did any midfield rotations. So Gus, Gus was only on the field for 7%. So for him, we only had 57% time on ground. He's normally, Gus is normally 80, 85%.
Yeah, it'd be in the certainly in the 80s, heading towards 90.
Right, so 90. Let's say, so we were 33% down on running players in that match. You take Gus out and you only put Laurie on the ground for 50%. That means 33% of the time, 33% of work rate has to be spread around the other midfield. And it also meant track, as I said, couldn't be pushed forward. But on that, I wonder whether. Laurie played midfield at Casey all season. Why couldn't they put it? I thought Goody could have put him in the middle, given him some serious minutes in the middle and put track forward. We needed something, a change up forward. So as I said, apart from the psychological impacts, so the other thing about Gus averages over 35 pressure points a game. He's been incredible for pressure in the last month. For example, in our win against the Swans, he had the fourth most pressure acts with 48 pressure points. And as I said, he's been in the top 5 for last 6 games. Laurie wasn't too bad, but he was actually applied more pressure than Salem and Fritsch and McDonald and quite a few of our more senior players. But he was still the 9th, so we really miss his pressure. That was a massive impact right across the board. But again, the midfield rotations and the pressure that Gus could apply that we just didn't cover. Number 3, score on transition and from turnover. I thought our defence was brilliant. There's been some criticism of it, but the Pies' defence was better, I think, to be honest, and particularly early on with their damaging turnover marks that triggered their scores. They absorbed a huge number of inside 50s, obviously, as well. So, whilst we can criticise what we did inside 50, a lot of that has to go down to how much pressure the Pies' defence put on them. And in that last quarter, how clean Quaynor was. He was just phenomenal, I thought, in that last quarter. But we actually defended them really well on transition. The Pies are always going to get some goals out the back, just as we're always going to scrounge some goals from our bombs inside 50. But we kept them below the season average that we concede from points from turnover, and half of that was in the first quarter. So you take out that first quarter and we held them brilliantly on transition. So we did the job. We stopped them playing their game. The problem is we could only manage half of our season average. So we average 51 points from turnover. That's our game. We've been talking about it all season. We are a team that scores on turnover. We're number 1 in the AFL from scores for turnover. And we could only manage 25 points from turnover. But the devil's in the detail. We kick 3 goals, 7 from turnovers, and they kick 6 goals, 4 from turnovers. If we'd kicked 7-3 instead of 3-7 from turnover, we win that game, going away. So we win it on expected score by 15. That's where it would have come from. The other relevant and interconnected stat with that is we kept them to 20 points from their defensive half. and only 13 points from D50, from outside their D50. That's impressive for a running team like the Pies that get on their bike and score most of their score from the back half. We kept them to, as I said, 26 points from the back half and only 13 points from their D50. 26 points is just a tick over the average of points we concede from the back half. So our defence was brilliant, I thought. But we could only average 16 points from the back half ourselves. Again, partly that was explained by inaccuracy, but it was also the fact that the ball was camped in our forward half for three quarters. It was 75% in our forward half to 25% in the last quarter. That is bananas. But 16 points from the back half is less than half our season average of 33 points. We just couldn't get any run and flow off the back. We couldn't get pace on the game. I'll go back to the beginning of the match. So number two, on the second most significant factor, I think, for where we lost the game was the first quarter. I think that was just critical. So it was key where we lost the game. As a flag last week, you can't get behind. Statistically, it's no good getting behind any more than 3 goals. You're in trouble, and we were in that area twice. So late in the match, it was 25 points, wasn't it, coming into the last quarter? It was 18 points at the end of the first quarter. That was absolutely critical, I thought, because we were behind the 8 ball from the get-go. Interestingly, in that quarter, we got smashed for territory, which is I reckon this. I haven't looked. I haven't found this out, but we were 45% for and 55% against. Maybe only the time we played the Blues, it was 45. That would be the only time that would be close. I think maybe the Suns got us for that in a couple of quarters too, perhaps. So that's really unusual. But what's funny about that is that we couldn't score on transition. So that was our opportunity to score on transition, and we couldn't. So interestingly, they scored the most for them when they dominated territory. So for all of this talk about Melbourne's method and territory, they actually converted. When they had the territory, they took their chances and they scored. A huge factor, a massive factor. We were -10 for contested possessions at quarter time. I know that because I could see the board again from where I was sitting, and that was expected score was -14 at the end of the first quarter, was the first row. The second row was contested possessions, and we were -10. That was our worst quarter for contested possessions since the second quarter in round 8 versus the Gold Coast. It's just you don't win games of footy, let alone finals, with a first quarter like that. So I reckon it's remarkable we got as close. This is from Delightful Demons in the stats file thread on Demonland. Really terrific thread for anyone interested in the sort of statistical view of a game. He writes, our starts have been average to poor since round 18 versus Brisbane when we were up by 17 at quarter time. And last night was our third worst quarter one result for the year, behind at -26 versus the Kangaroos in round 21 and -25 versus the Lions in Brisbane in round 2. That's no time to have your worst quarter of footy basically for the season almost, or your third worst. It was reflected in the player ratings in the quarter one, which were just shocking. Our total player ratings in quarter one were 25 less than the Pies in total, and our only players with more than 3 were Bowie. More than 3 points were Bowie and Gawn in that quarter. So only 2 players out of all of our players. By contrast, the Pies had 11 players with more than 3 points, with Hill scoring 10.5 in that quarter, and more than 16 of our players for the entire game. The Pies were on, as you said, Andy, credit to them. But as I said, I am absolutely convinced Gus going down the way he did was a massive factor. The players were in shock. And all of the numbers that I just said, suggest that. I think it's remarkable that we got back into the game in the way we did. We saw a very similar drop-off, almost identical drop-off when Maxi went down in round 2 against the Lions. We just were in shock in that round. We talked about it on the podcast, and we were in shock in this match, our players. We flipped the script in the last quarter and outscored the Pies by 22 player rating points and outscored them by 3 player rating points by the end of the match. So we ended up in front on player ratings, which is just incredible given that first quarter. So some of the numbers are nuts. So the number one reason I think that we lost the game, or the Pies won, depending on your perspective, it's when we lose, it's invariably going to be of one thing. It's our accuracy. So for all of the talk about this connection and blah, 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 it's as simple as this for me, is inaccuracy. Our last 5 losses, Collingwood, Carlton, GWS, Geelong, Freo, have all been due to poor accuracy, even though we smashed the opposition in all of those examples defensively or in the contest. It's just it's staggering our shooting for goal in this match. So, we won't go into detail now about expected score because, Andy, I did read the running sheet tonight, so there's questions about it. So I was going to drill down on that now, but just on our shots from goal, from general play, so this is not set shots, so this is when the ball's loose. We had 9 shots, 3 goals, 3 behind, 3 on the full or didn't hit the target. We had 5 on the fulls. I can't remember whether they're all from set shots. That's just not good enough. It's just not good enough. They only had 4 shots from general play. That's incredible. They only had 4 shots at goal that weren't set shots, and they kicked 2-2. So they kicked 14 points. They had less than half as many general play shots and only kicked 7 points less than we did. But it was from the set positions. So this is where this conversation about our method and we need to hit players up more and all of that stuff is we had our shots at goal. Like we had 14 shots at goal. We kicked 4 goals, 5 behinds, and doing the math, we missed 5 altogether. I mean, conversely, they had 11 shots, kicked 7 goals, and kicked 3 behinds, and only 1 was a complete miss, or I can't remember if it went on the full or not. Now, partly that's, they had some better shots than us, but our set shots weren't that difficult. So there were some longer shots, I'll grant you that, from 50 metres, but none, and they had some better shots from the corridor, but we had our opportunities. There's all this talk about conversion, cohesion, efficiency. It's like a microcosm of the whole conversation that we had on the podcast for about 4 weeks in the middle of the year. The simple reason is we lost this match because we were inaccurate. We didn't kick the goals.
Yeah, that's true. And had we been a bit more accurate, we would have won. Had our connection, our inside 50 connection been better. Let me just talk. If our inside 50 connection would have been better, we might have won the game by 30, 40, 50 points. I read somewhere that any team that wins the inside 50 count by about 20, like what we did, 20 to 30, wins the game by 50 points.
Yeah. So explain that, work that through for me. That's what I hear people say. But what do you mean by if our connection was better?
If we were hitting up targets, if we had 20 more inside 50s, yet only how many more scoring shots? 2 more scoring shots?
Yeah, but so, that's my point.
So if our connection was better, we'd be having more shots at goal.
In a bit more detail in a bit, but our method means that we are kicking into a congested forward line invariably.
Yeah,
so
well,
the better we
that
play,
doesn't help.
The more we dominate the opposition, the bigger the challenge that comes. So after quarter time, right, we smashed them for time in forward half. That meant we were always kicking into a crowded forward line. That's the conundrum with our game plan, but it's our game plan. Right, so we can't change it. We could maybe, and there's a question about this.
Yeah,
so
there is.
Yeah, so we could tinker with some things to create more space. So, for instance, we could maybe move it around the arc more, or we could set our defenders deeper to allow the opposition to flood out and to create more space, which would mean 2 things. It would mean we would get less inside 50s, so we'd less opportunities to hit players up. But if we hit players up, right, they still got to go back and kick the set shot.
No, I understand. Accuracy is a massive problem.
What our set shot was. We had set shots. So we had 14 shots from a set shot where the man's on the mark and we're going in, and we could only convert 4 of them. Yeah. So let's say we had more, Andy. So let's say we had more set shots. Where's the guarantee we would kick them?
No guarantee. I'm agreeing with you. I think accuracy is a big, massive problem.
Collingwood had 11 shots at goal and kicked 7-3. If they'd kicked 3-7 using their method, right, we would have to adopt Collingwood to do what you were just saying. We would have to adopt Collingwood's method.
Well, we can't change things this day,
No, so, right. But let's say we did. Let's say we were able to, and we adopted Collingwood's method, right? So, and we took the way they want to play footy. They kicked 7-3 from their 11 shots. If they'd kicked 3-7, they would have lost the game.
Yeah,
where's the guarantee we would have kicked 7-3? Do you honestly think if they only had 11 shots at goal, right, with their method, right? So it's not like, but they kicked 7-3. Do you honestly think we would have kicked 7-3 with those same shots?
No, I'm agreeing with you. I think our accuracy is terrible. I'm just saying if.
Yeah, but that's my point is that this thing about this notion of we could create if we could create more leading spaces and then hit up.
Yeah, no, I understand.
The way yes, maybe some might be more in the corridor. That's right. Some might be more in the corridor, but we still got to go back and kick them, and we don't. No, we don't kick our goals. So we need to do weight of numbers. Yeah, right. We've just got to be more accurate.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. The other thing we've got to keep in mind is Collingwood have a very good defence, and there is no space when there's 30 players sitting inside the 50-metre arc. They are very fit. That's why they're at the top of the ladder. They flood back furiously, and there simply is not space for people to, I hate this term, lower their eyes and try and hit up a target. There are no targets.
Yeah. And here's an example exactly of that, George, was Maxi trying to hit up Nibbler late in the game, right? He was trying to drop it on a dime, and everyone around me, all the Melbourne fans, are groaning at Maxi for not having a long shot trying to hit up Nibbler. Right, but how was he going to hit up Nibbler? It's exactly as George said, there were 30 players inside 50 at that point, right? Where was the space to hit up Nibbler? So again, we'll get into that method in a little bit. So there's a couple of questions that relate to it, but the bottom line is, it's like we've been talking about for 3-4 years, is that we aren't technically very good kicks, and again, it's come and hurt us.
All right. Well, let's get into the show, and I've gone forward in my notes one page, but here we go. The first one's about our slow starts. So Melbourne asks, why are we such slow starters? Leave it to Diva. Also asks, why do we start so slowly? El Diablo adds, last year we finished off matches badly with fourth quarter fade-outs. This year we start bad. Can we learn to be more consistent? Are the players or the coaches at fault, or perhaps both? Go Lordy says, Collingwood seemed faster than us, first to the ball. Even Cozzy seemed to be beaten for speed. I am astonished at the clearance numbers. We won in the centre and drew even at stoppages around the ground. But it felt like the filth were all over us. They broke out into the open more than us, piercing our defensive wall. We won in contested possession and turnovers, but it didn't feel like it. Question, I wonder whether Goody is as calm and underexcited in the rooms before the game as he is in his press conferences. Are we overconfident in our ability to finish strongly? Does he not care if we are down a quarter time? Is he too cerebral to give them a hot gospel rev up before the game? And Freed from Kazaya says, hi gents, like many others on Demonland, watching us fall behind early against the Pies made me want to comb my hair with a potato peeler. It seems we often take a while to get going. How do we fix slow starts? Is it even possible? Or is the D's propensity to play from behind just one of those mysteries of the universe? If we concede the first three to the Blues, I'll have an out-of-body experience from which I may never recover. Thanks in advance. So, George, we've been plagued by these slow starts throughout much of the back end of the season. Any explanation for this?
I'm going with one of the mysteries of the universe.
Okay.
It's the only sensible one I can come up with. Look, we were beaten comprehensively in this first quarter, and Bin Man's hit on a couple of the reasons why. I was very surprised right from the very first bounce. Max was taken out by Gawn. Sorry, Gawn was taken out by Cox. Was that surprising to anybody? Absolutely not. The knee went straight up into him.
In the first bounce, he went straight at him.
Yep, absolutely. I think Cox won the first 9 hitouts in the first quarter. Just incredible. Just to beat Max 9 times in a row, that set the whole tone. During the week, Maynard came out and said it's going to be physical. Goodness gracious, that's exactly what happened, and we weren't prepared for that. It was disappointing from that aspect. I mean, you can't do anything about straight out thuggery, but that's exactly how they played. As Goody said, this is finals. It's different. It's a different game, and we saw it. As Melbourne supporters against Essendon in 2000, they came out and they beat the living suitcase out of us, and that's the approach that Collingwood will take, and that's exactly what we got. It was surprising that we were able to come back when the game got to around to playing football. We were the superior side. I don't think we can do anything. Certainly losing Gus within a couple of minutes was absolutely critical. Binman's highlighted all the reasons for that. You just can't take a player like that out of the middle of the ground in particular, and around the ground in his defensive components that he puts in. So it wasn't surprising in a way that we had a poor start. Which only reinforces the story about our poor starts. But certainly the factors in the first, in those first couple of minutes, Max being beaten comprehensively, and it was great to see him come back later in the game. But taking Brayshaw out just set everybody off, on the wrong foot in the first place. I don't think it'll happen again.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to know, except it's human nature. I think that the fact that it was Gus as well, like it's not like when Maxi similarly that they were off in that quarter, as we were saying before, the player rating numbers, but they all looked a little bit off. I felt off at the ground. I'm not sure what others felt, but like I didn't really recover at all. But so the other question I had about the start was our game plan, and we'll get into that in a bit of detail later with the method, but our game plan, if we're dominating matches, ironically, we cannot allow we can't allow teams to get out to a margin, because I think McRae, I'll be curious to know what your thoughts are on this, Andy and George, but the game became slower after quarter time, and partly that was the way we were playing. But it did occur to me, and wonder whether McRae allowed that a little bit. And as we've talked about, that sort of basketball analogy. In basketball, if you've got a lead, you slow the game down. And so if we fall behind, we need a fast game, but we play a game that's it can be forward half and slow. So it's a bit of a conundrum. I actually think the other issue for me in that first quarter, that whether it was Gus going down or other factors, was, as I've said before, Bobby Hill torched us in that first quarter, and McVie got a bit of a lesson, I thought. Rue was out of position a few times, and I thought he got a bit of a lesson. And was it the first quarter he got reported, or that ultimately?
Yep.
I didn't see it at the time, but that says to me a player whose head's not in the game like that. It's barely registered for me the fact that Rue's not going to be playing this week, with all of the Gus sort of drama. But I think some of those young players struggled to pick up the pace early on. I thought Hibbo did too. Luckily, Elliott didn't take his 2 chances. Hibbo was great after that, so credit to him. But and I wondered a little bit, to be honest. It felt like Hibbo's selection, instead of Turner. I could see the logic of it. We talked about it last week, but it felt to me that structurally their defense was a little bit off. And it seems to me, in hindsight, a funny time to mess with that structure of the third tall. It felt a little bit like the structure was off as well. They were clever in that first quarter, I thought, and they pushed back. They took some key intercept marks. Part of that was our kicks inside 50. It wasn't so much for me that they were bombing it in. It was that they weren't kicking to the forwards' advantage. There's a real skill in weighting the ball to the right side of the contest. And 2 or 3 of their intercept marks were really on us, because we put it over the back and gave it to the defender. Again, though, that you can't discount the pressure they brought. They were fabulous in the first quarter. But it's totally right. We need to sort that out. You don't win games of footy in finals by going down 3 goals at quarter time. I wouldn't have a clue, but I'd reckon statistically, teams that go down by 3 goals or more after the first quarter in finals, it'd be probably something like only 5% of teams go on to win, or 10% of teams go on to win. So, we've got to sort that out for sure.
I was told a couple of years ago by one of the assistant coaches at Melbourne, I think the number's something like 80%. If you're leading at quarter time, you've got 80% chance of winning.
By any margin. Yeah. So leading by 3 goals, probably maybe 5% of times you go on to win in a final, because it gives the other thing is it gives the opposition coach some more tactical levers, doesn't it? Because they can protect a lead and don't necessarily have to keep going. So it was a really curious game because Collingwood didn't ever really play like that high scoring Collingwood. We kept them to 60 points and, it was only in that first quarter they took their chances, but we had our chances too.
Oh boy, George, 80%. You've given me another thing to be anxious about when I go to the footy these days, so thanks for that.
It wasn't me, it was the coach.
Finals, 80% of finals.
Well, our next topic, it's all very much linked to the forward line, inside 50 connection, accuracy and expected score. And it's impossible to separate the discussion of all this, so as they're inextricably linked. So strap yourself in. We've got a lot of questions on these. I'm going to go through them. There's a lot of questions and comments. So I want to go through them because there's a lot that a lot of Demon Landers have to say, and some of their comments are irrelevant. Some of them may be poo-pooed by someone here, but let's see what they have to say. Spirit of Norm Smith says, the Pies did not beat us, we beat ourselves. Huge disappointment, huge. Some of the problems are the same old. The effort in the second half was huge, but dumb footy and poor skills are deflating. Bidman, it was 69 inside 50s to 37. 7 goals. Wow, that's possibly a new record low. 10%. Most sides average 30 to 35%. Goody 2022 and all of 2023 was saying we are getting better and working on our connection forward of centre. Really? Really? It's horrible. Let's bomb the ball inside 50 to a pack. Really? Madness is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. No one leads. No one hits the bullet pass. No one. Viney, Track, Salem, Oliver, Sparrow. No one hits a forward with a pass. No one lowers their eyes, George. Another point is shots from 45 to 55 metres out. Success rate about 3%, but players keep stepping up. Tonight, Oliver, Smith, Rivers, wow, incredible. Madness again. Huge hearts, huge effort. Can't fault the effort, but dumb footy, dumb. It's the only word for it. There's no system, no strategy, no improvement. Perhaps we can recruit elite midfield kicks, maybe just players who hit targets. Frustration, disappointment, gutted. That's honestly how all D supporters feel. Supreme Demon says we really need to overhaul our forward line. Losing Harry Petty and Jake Milksham hurt us. Our forward line efficiency and connectivity, as well as our goal kicking, really hurt us as well. How do we rectify this serious issue of a dysfunctional forward line? Bates Mate asks, who is to blame for the forward connection and lack of scoring when we get it in? We've been hearing about it for 3+ years and always manages to be our downfall. Is it midfielders just blazing away, forwards not leading to the right or dangerous spots, or the 3 leading to the same spot in the forward half, not having Crummers in the right spot? Cozzy is usually in the air flying for marks. Is it all of the above? I understand we had Fritsch and T-Mac coming in off long layoffs, but they are experienced enough to be able to lead to the right spots. Multiple entries we hear so much about do in theory create more chances, but as Collingwood proved, having less entries but higher quality gives you better scoring chances when you go in there. Go Lordy says the number of fruitless forward 50 entries is the result of our own defensive success. We are less efficient than other teams because we win it back quickly and send it back in when the opposition is still crowding our forward 50. We need to fake a fumble on the wing or even further back and draw the opposition out before rushing it back in, sending it over their heads. Don't know how you coach for that. KLV says Goodwin has been criticised by various in the media for the lack of strategy in-game to fix the entry inside 50. What's your opinion? Was it a coaching failure or a lack of player execution? Demon WA says we earned the second chance and will take on a decent opposition next week. Keen to understand whether the panel saw our poor inside 50 conversion to be attributed to poor connection or just great defence. Clearly I'm being a little facetious. These two things are linked, but I feel like our fans aren't willing to give the Collingwood defence credit where it's due. We were 2 kicks away from a home prelim. Moore and Quaynor stood taller than our forwards and made the difference. The Old Fart says, clearly our forward line will need some adjustments in the unfortunate circumstances we find ourselves in. What will our forward half look like on Friday night? Also, I need a major injection of positivity. Please go to work, guys. Love the pods. Monocular says, oh my God, where do we start? Obviously, the cause of most of our losses has been and remains our forward line and mid-forward connection, such as it is. What is the point, George, of winning expected score? Not sure why he's targeting George there. Week after week, it is actual score that we and the football world at large care about. The Demons' inability to convert has become ingrained as the hallmark of this squad. Players, coaches, and maybe even recruiters, 100%, and it frustrates the bejesus out of most of us fans. Bomb it long to a huge pack when we don't have any pack marking forwards. What could be more insane? Wouldn't it be better to bomb it long, if they must, into a semi-empty space and at least have an opportunity for a crummer to crumb, or to spear it into space and even a contest, or even to a contest low? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over, especially when it clearly doesn't work, and expecting a different result. If you always do what you've always done, you will always get what you've always got. Thinking ahead to the off-season, hopefully 3 weeks away, surely the club must get a new and different thinking forward coach. What are the panel's thoughts on replacing JVR? Some of this board have suggested Disco Turner. I am unaware if he has ever played or even trained with the forwards. Would trying him out in a cutthroat final be sane? Maybe it would. Could it be worse? My guess would be Shaki, though I don't in any way enthuse. Was T-Mac as bad as many here post? And of course, there is the elephant in the room, Brundy. Is there any place at all for him? Desperation all forward, really desperate, extra tall mid? I'm not sure if if as a sub he would offer sufficient versatility. Many thanks once again for your hard work and fantastic podcast. Even after such a heartbreaking loss, your calm analysis sometimes help allay my MFCSS. D for Life, we're almost there, guys. D for Life says, losing Big Benny Brown, Petty and Melksham or equivalent is going to damage any forward connection. And in T-Mac and Fritsch injuries, just hurts each player's form coming back. Fritsch kicks his shank from 40 like he normally would, and I think we go on to win the game. Weber says, hey gents, looking forward to the podcast. Big Man will rightfully point out how he predicted that a poor first quarter and anything beyond a 3-goal jump would be hard to pull back, and others on Demon Land will want an explanation and fix for our forward 50 connection, inefficiency and kicking inaccuracy. But I reckon you should iterate to all that there's a bigger elephant in the room. Injuries across the season are the most objectively reliable indicator of success for any team. Look at just our forward line. Long stretches of unavailability for T-Mac, Ben Brown, Bailey Fritsch, Harry Petty and now Jake Melksham. No JVR this week to boot. Our injury stats this year, obviously compared to our flag competitors, simply look like making it a bridge too far. It's a depressing perspective, I know, but won't be ignored. It's the most inconvenient truth in football. Surfer D says, I'm something of a stats man a la Bim Man. I believe that over time, statistical dominance in key areas of the game translates to scoreboard dominance. However, the Ds have an issue. I believe that we lose more games when the expected score predicts that we should have won than any other team. I wish I had access to the predicted score database over the last few years because I would like to quantify that statement, but I'd be surprised if it's not the case. So I now believe that there's something more intangible going on that the stats aren't telling us. I feel like we're the reverse Collingwood. We lose when we should win and they win when they should lose. So what's going on? I feel like there's something in our game plan more significant than straight kicking. Our mistakes often cost us easy goals. Our full ground defensive web takes a huge amount of effort, and I'm worried that it leaves us spread out too thin to run in waves on the turnover. It feels like the goals we concede are easy goals, whereas ours are the result of brutally hard efforts and contest work. Teams seem content to play the game in our forward half, causing congestion and basically forcing us to kick stoppage goals. I'd love your thoughts on this. I feel like we're good enough to beat any team, but we make everything harder than it needs to be. This is why these losses are so frustrating. Gorn Hub says, with plenty of chat around expected score again, we should have won by 3 goals. I wanted to ask about another element of our forward line. When watching other teams, I'm always amazed at how open their forward lines are and how easily they can mark inside 50 compared to us. Richo was mentioning in the commentary our lack of marks inside 50. Can we still keep a high number of inside 50s with a more open forward line? I feel that shifting our players outside of the 50 will protect against the rebound game of Carlton and Collingwood while allowing more space to lead into, hopefully resulting in more marks inside 50. Now, we also received a voicemail from Noah about our forward line.
Hi, this is Noah from Bentley. Just like to say I really love the podcast and doing a really good job. What my question was for tonight was, with our forward line and our inaccurate kicking that occurred during the game, what is the solution? I didn't think T-Mac was effective at all. And I thought that inability to convert goals either due to pressure or just poor kicking, was one of our main letdowns. And with the issues with our forward line, I know I keep asking about it each week or every time I call up, that this is a big issue for us. Just want to know what the team thinks about our forward line, whether really bring back Grundy is going to be the solution, whether we have to bring back Ben Brown, or is there anything in the VFL that we could do?
So now we did have a 4-part voicemail from Nudge in regards to most of the issues that have just been voiced. And Nudge, I will say that I very much appreciate the voicemail, but I simply can't play 8 minutes on the air. I was going to attempt to edit it down, but I already had so much preparation to do. So please, and this goes for anybody who's calling in with a voicemail, be concise, be to the point. And that's the best way to get on the air. So thank you, Nudge. You had some excellent points, and it was probably just cathartic for you to get it off your chest. If you call in with multiple topics, it makes it harder for me to edit and place it where it needs to go in the show. So keep it concise. That's my hot tip. Also, you called 4 times at 10 a.m. when I was frantically trying to buy tickets. But back to our forward 50 connection issues, our inaccuracy up forward and expected score. Oh, my word. There's a lot to unpack there. Poor conversion of our inside 50 entries and poor conversion of the chances we did get. B-Man, what's the solution? And you're saying kick straighter. I know you love winning on expected score, but expected score isn't going to solve any of the issues.
I love winning, but
and nor is expected score going to get us a place in the preliminary final. So fix our forward line, B-Man, in 10 minutes or 2 minutes.
Right, well, yes, learn from me, Nudge, because I am the king of concise.
There were 4. You get 2 minutes. You get 2 minutes for voicemails, and he filled up 4 of them, and then called back.
You need to give me a time limit because then I'm good with deadlines. But I mean, this is the same conversation we've had all year about our thing. So I'll tell 3 things about those. Unpack those questions, but 3 key things, right? Yeah. So the first thing is that's our method, right? So I'm not arguing for the method. I'm not saying that this is, there isn't better ways to play, but this is the way Goody plays his football. This is his tactics. Now, I forget who it was in the questions, in the multi questions, I think it was Surfer D, said that statistically you were going to win more games with this method. So, that's how Goody thinks. He thinks about it in totality and thinks, well, this is the style. This game plan is built around the players that he's got, right? So all of that stuff that people say, well, why can't you lower your eyes? Why can't you create leading lanes? The Pies method, it proves it. If you can get it in quicker, then you will get better shots at goals. We don't have Pies players with the same level of foot skills, right? Where Goody has built a game plan. Remember back to 2017. Right, he had a game plan almost very similar to Collingwood's, which was super fast transition and move the ball from the back half. And we consistently got opened up by the best teams because we kept on turning it over. In this game, as I said before, we actually did brilliantly at controlling turnover, and we created enough turnovers ourselves, but we just didn't convert from them. So that was the problem. With 51 points we normally score from turnover, we normally give up 26. We were right on that average. We only gave up, I think we give up 25 on average. We only gave up 26. We normally score 51. We only scored 26, something like that. So this is the method, right? This is what he goes. Now, as I said before, there's some tweaks that you could probably look to do. You could, in that last quarter, I was hoping that they would, maybe chip it around the arc a little bit before they entered. But the fact will remain with our method. The better we play, the more dominant we are, the more forward half football we have, the more often it's going to be 30 players with inside 50. That's just the way we play. Expected score is that it's an interesting stat, but it was, as I said a few weeks ago, it was designed for the clubs. Champion Data designed it for the clubs because the clubs wanted a measure like they have in soccer, which is expected goals. Expected goals in international soccer is a huge data point for the clubs, right? So they want to know what's your expected goals in a match. The AFL clubs asked for the same thing and got this expected scores from Champion Data. What is it? So it really is a measure of accuracy. Every shot on goal that we have, the team has, is analysed based on where on the ground it was taken and how much pressure the player was under when they took it. That's a really important point, right? So say it again. So every shot's analysed based on where it was taken, so where on the ground it was taken, and how much pressure the player was under. The expected accuracy of the shot is determined based on the results from that location and pressure level over the last decade, so 10 years of AFL matches. For example, a set shot from 30 metres out on a 45-degree angle has an expected accuracy of 50%. So a team would be expected to score 3 points, reflecting a 50-50 chance at goal. If they kick the goal, their expected score would be 3, but their actual score would be 6. But if they kick it behind instead, their expected score would still be 3, with their actual score being 1. Over the course of the game, these incidents add up to create an expected score for the match. As another example, a snap in general play from 40 metres out on the boundary has an expected score of 0.6 points, 10% accuracy. The expected score of each shot does not take into account the individual player records nor the team records. It uses a league-wide standard measured over 10 years. Why that's important is because it means that when you look at each of those shots, if we were on average as good a kicking team as the league average over a 10-year period, not just this season, the expected score in this match was 70 to 55. Right? So it's really a bit of a neither here nor there with a method, because with those sorts of foot skill errors, even if we had a different method and we moved it really quickly in there, the best you could argue would be, you'd have some more open space to hit up leading lanes, and you would then only get more accurate if you were kicking from directly in front of goals and kicking into the corridor. But if you end up with a game plan that's built around needing foot skills to transition the ball and needing foot skills to kick the ball through, but with less shots at goal because you're getting less inside 50s, well, then you've got a problem. And that's what Goody looked at when he looked at this team. He said, we don't have enough elite ball users. So we're going to design a method that suits the players that we've got that's going to win us a flag. Now, we've got one flag under the way. We're still in the race for another. All right. So, yes, a method could be changed and look, but they're not going to do it now at this point of the season. I don't know what people are expecting. So the other thing, the main thing about as we've talked about with the method, is that what we lacked on the weekend was pace on the game. We could not get any pace on the game. We could not get any speed on the ball, as they say on the commentary. And that's because it was camped in our forward half. 75% of the time in the last quarter, it was in our forward half. So that means that we couldn't get any bounce off the halfback flank because it was hardly ever coming off the halfback flank. So the irony of our method, and there's a question about wet weather here that sort of touches on this, but the irony about our method is the more dominant we are, the more difficult it's going to be for us to convert inside 50s to shots on goals because it's going into a crowded forward line more often. So perhaps they could have looked at some tweaks. So, for instance, we have our wall set up really high, which traps it in. Maybe you could take that right back, but then you risk turning the ball over and giving the opposition. The other thing about our method that people don't seem to clue onto is if it's down our end 75% of the time, it's not up their end, right? They can't score. So they didn't score a goal in the last quarter of the final. We scored 3 with that method. All right, so that's where Goody would be sitting down. We'll go, well, our method meant that the best team in the AFL, by what everyone's saying, the now flag favourite, couldn't score a goal in the last quarter of a qualifying final with our method. So it's a bit like, if you've got the ball and the opposition hasn't, they can't score the goal. And sure, you could argue, well, their goals look pretty, they get them out the back, but they only scored 60 points. If we'd come into this match and said that we're going to keep them to 60 points, Goody would have taken that all day, every day. We would have. If last week we were talking on the podcast and said, well, what score would you take from the opposition and still expect to win? We would have taken 60 points, wouldn't we?
Yep. Big
The
man.
other thing I think people need to keep in mind is also the injury situation, that we've got a bandaged up forward line effectively with Melcham out, Ben Brown out, JVR's going to be out.
Petty out.
Petty
Who kicked, by the way, 10 straight. All right.
Yeah.
So suddenly people can bang on and say, well, expected scores nothing. When Petty was playing, we were winning because he kicked 10 straight in the forward line.
JVR's 20. He's played virtually every game this season. It's a big ask that we've and been backup ruck in the most recent games as well. It's a hard role to play. But the bottom line is Collingwood are good. They've got a good back line, and I don't know how people think they're going to take 15 Collingwood players out of the forward 50 for Melbourne to enable us to open up leading lanes and things like that. They are well drilled. They get back. They clog it up beautifully. They have great intercepting players in Quaynor and Moore. You can't do anything about it. We've got great players down our back line. We held them to a lousy 60 points.
Yeah, exactly. And they kicked accurately to get those 60 points. If they'd kicked on expected score, I just said, what was it? So their expected score was 55. Yeah. So they kicked above there because they've got good kicks.
Yep.
And so Webber's point about injury and your point, George, is spot on. And as it turned out, ironically, given our criticisms of your and my criticism, George, of Milk over the journey, his out was massive. He was so big because you'd expect he would have taken some of those chances. But the other thing is that he would have gone on to Moore and he wouldn't have allowed Moore 11 intercept marks. That was another huge factor. It's interesting you mentioned JVR. He had a shocker. He, on player ratings, he was the 45th rated player on the field. Jamie Elliott had a worse game. So he had a minus 0.8 player rating for this game, with a predicted player rating on Wheelo's method of predicting what the score that they should get. His predicted player rating was 7.6 coming into this game. His best is 14.8 in a game, and he was minus 0.8 for the game. So he's one of our key forwards. He couldn't get near it and gets reported to boot. So
he just looked tired to me. He was a 20-year-old kid, he's run out of steam. He's frustrated.
Yeah. And another stat I don't want to pick on JVR, but it just goes to the point about our forward line, is he had 15 ruck contests and only one hit out.
Yeah,
it's like 15. And Tom McDonald had 9 ruck contests and only one hit out. So between our two forwards rucking up forward, who we want them to hit it to advantage so you can score from stoppages inside 50. Between Tom McDonald and Van Ruin, and I'm guessing almost all of these, some of them would have been for Van Ruin in the ruck contest. They had 24 ruck contests between them for 2 hit outs. I mean, Maxi had 79 for 31, which is phenomenal. But, your backup ruckman, begs the question about the decision to play McDonald ahead of Grundy, doesn't it?
Yep.
I was just going to say hello, Brodie Grundy. All right, let's get to the next one. Lazy asks, did we lose the match at at the selection table? The too tall defence has rarely worked this year and doesn't give Lever the best chance to intercept. Supreme Demon asks, was it a mistake not playing 3 tall defenders? Would it have been better to have played Brodie Grundy instead of Tom McDonald? I think we made the mistake at selection table, but losing Angus Brayshaw early was probably the biggest blow to us. So personally, I thought our defence was solid for 3/4 of the match. Most of the scoring in the first quarter came from very quick entries into their forward 50s to a player running into space. It's very hard to defend. George, as Lazy pointed out, 3 talls is our one wood. Was it a mistake not to play 3 talls in defence? What are your thoughts on selection?
It was. I said so last week. I think Myercheck and McStay got 3 goals in total between them. That's their 2 talls. Cameron got 1 as well, but that was again because of the way the ball came in, and he was just standing there waiting for it. It's horses for courses. We brought in Hibbert to get to overcome Elliott, and he did magnificently with that.
Minus 2.7 rating points for the match, so he gave him a bath, didn't he?
Yeah, basically, gave him a bath. They scored 60 points at the end. They scored 2 points in the last quarter. Our defence wasn't the problem. we've talked about other reasons why we didn't win the game, but certainly putting in another tall, who's only marginally tall. Let's say we brought in Turner taller than Hibberd, wouldn't have made any difference to the situation, and I think Elliott would have been more problematic to a young player than the old, wise, experienced Hibberd. So and that proved to be the case.
Let's talk about the weather, because that could have impacted.
Just on selection though, sorry, Andy, I didn't think they'd bring Grundy in, but in hindsight, and it's a wonderful thing, hindsight, I would have preferred Grundy over McDonald, because I didn't think McDonald had a particularly bad game, but partly because of the way of what Georgia was saying, we knew going in that Cox would target Maxi, and they brought in two ruckmen. I just think that, it may have been, it would have been great to have Maxi in the same way we had it. Grundy the same way we had the Blues, but he probably didn't play because he played poorly on that night, except for that last quarter when we needed a ruck. And so maybe we just didn't have the option because, as I just said before, Van Ruin, he was ruined. He was not rucking to any AFL standard in this game, nor was T-Mac. I don't think he took any centre bounces. All of his was inside 50. If you had Grundy, at least you could have given Maxi a chop out in the middle, and you could have run Maxi up forward as being a marking up option forward, because his marking was unbelievable. Just on Maxi, the game, he was the top-rated player, 20 points for the match. He's best for the season. It's 35, so 7 scoring involvements he had. 22 contested possessions Maxi had. That's just nuts, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah, I said that at the top of the show. That's incredible.
And sorry, one more selection issue that I think was a mistake, and I think it would turn out to be a big mistake. And unfortunately, all of the things lined up to make this a big mistake is Laurie shouldn't have played.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about
I understand why he was played, but I thought he might play because he'd played in those lead-up games, but all day, every day, I would have had Spargo in as the sub, and at least then you would have had a senior player with finals experience coming on for Gus. I thought it was incredible when I saw that number, 50% time on ground for Laurie, 51% for a player who played all but 3 minutes of the game is not a huge amount of confidence in the young fella, and essentially we were down a player for the match with those sorts of numbers. His pressure was reasonable, and in fact he played better on rating points than a bunch of Melbourne players, so maybe I'm being a bit harsh on him, but I think it was a mistake not to go with Spargo.
We do have a question about the sub, and you've just jumped all over that one. Big man, tried to warn you.
Well, I wouldn't have had him in the sub. I would have had him on the ground. But
just because we have a voicemail asking specifically about that. The weather, Demon Eyes asked, how much did the weather influence the result? What say what says 0 from 6 in the wet, slippery conditions in 2023. Why? So, Big man, tell us the weather. It's been the bane of our existence this season. Why do we struggle in these slippery conditions?
I mean, we talked last week that there are probably advantages in this match. I just think the challenge for us is that it turns it into a contest game, and like I said before, it's a bit of a catch-22. The more it turns into a contest-heavy game, the more we dominate because we win contests. The more we win time in half, the more it's camped in our forward line, the more crowded it is, the more frustrated fans get because the ball's getting quote unquote bombed in on top of people's heads and we're inefficient. I just think it two things really, as I've talked about the game plan becomes more of a contest to contest, and that means that it's more likely to suit us, and so therefore we dominate time in forward half, that we struggle then, and we can't get any flow off the half-back flank. So we just we get lots of space. When we move the ball quick and run in waves, we get lots of space forward of the ball when inside 50, and that's what we've got to generate. You can't generate that when you've got 75% of the time the ball's in your forward half. That's one. Number two is, as I've been talking out for 20 years I've been talking about this, and particularly the last 5 years and on the podcast for the last 3, is we've got terrible kickers in this team. That's as simple as that. And the biggest things that exacerbate poor technique are pressure and wet weather. they're the two things that make poor kickers even worse. So on Thursday night, we had finals, pressure, and we had wet weather. So for me, they're the big factors for why wet weather, why we're so poor in the wet weather. I'm so thrilled that it's going to be good on Friday night, except for that dew point.
The other thing about the wet weather is that if you look at our best kicks, they're probably on the half-back flank in the players in the side, and their best kicks are in the midfield. The side bottoms, the Pendleburys, the Akoses. We're protecting. We're able to exit the defence very well, but it hurts us up the field because we haven't got the players up the field who can deliver.
Yeah. And I wonder, George, there was another factor that this was just a thought bubble I had really, was I heard Richardson interviewed not long before the match, and he was asked about the weather, or maybe it was the day before, I can't remember. And they were saying, we know we're planning for it, wet weather footy. We've been criticised during the year by some posters on Demonland, and we've talked about it on the podcast, of not playing wet weather footy. Well, I wonder where ironically is that we were playing too much wet weather footy in this, that we were trying to get territory at all costs, that we weren't maybe as brave as we could have been with kicks to the corridor, in particular that first quarter when the ball was in motion between the two ends. That's when our opportunity was to get, scoring, get some scoring, but our head wasn't in the game in that first quarter, and we never got another shot at it. The game never turned into a fast transition game at all, and hopefully Friday night will.
You've now given me another tab to look at in my weather app, because on Friday at 7:50 the dew point will be 10. 10 degrees. I don't know what it is. What that means.
What's the dew point? What's the actual temperature?
Once
the dew point reaches the actual temperature, it rains.
Oh, well, it's not going to rain.
Okay.
It's 10 dew point, and I would imagine it's going to be a lot warmer than that at that time. It's going to be about 15, 17. 17. 17. Okay. No rain. Thanks for that, George. You learn something new every day. So that was my new thing. We've talked a bit about losing Gus, but there is one point about losing Gus that we haven't really touched on besides the actual fact of losing Gus. So OMID says, media blackout initiated as of this morning, watching Goody's post-match presser, except, of course, for the Demonland podcast. Felt like losing track forward minutes when Brayshaw got KO'd by Maynard, cost us dearly, not to mention losing a top player in Angus Brayshaw as well. We were then down a rotation early, being forced to bring on Laurie in the first quarter. He had a shocker and collected just 3 more disposals than Gus for the whole game. D for life adds Brayshaw being taken out, unsettled the Demons in the first quarter and also hurt us for the rest of the game. So we've talked about losing Gus, the player, but track from our forward line structure really put a spanner in the works, and I guess by all reports, Gus really isn't doing too great. According to track, probably now a question mark on whether he plays again this year. And I guess in terms of his history with concussion, this could have serious implications on his playing future. But George, how much of an impact do you think losing Gus early had on our team in terms of our structures? Track forward is a big, playing track out of the forward line. We lost that weapon out of our forward line, having to play him in the middle.
Yeah. We've talked about this a little. It's not just losing a quality player like Brayshaw. He'd be expected to get 25 to 30 possessions in a game like this, and Laurie finished up with 5. Suddenly, where do you get those from? Depending on a Petrarca or an Oliver or a Viney to pick up the slack. So that was the first thing. So you've not only just lost a mid, you've also lost a rotation as well. That Laurie didn't go into the middle at any time, but Brayshaw would have at some point during the game. So again, who has to take up the slack? The rest of the mids tires them out. That's a secondary effect. You then also lose the opportunity to rest Petrarca in the middle, in the forward line, because he's having to play more time in the middle. Makes the opposition's situation a lot easier because where he's going to be going to, where he's not going to be going to. When Petrarca moves up the ground, their problem becomes who in the hell do we put on him? suddenly that doesn't exist. So, but the other thing that we really lost was Brayshaw's ability to cover all areas of the ground. How many times have we seen during the season in the past?
Yeah.
Last line of defence, Angus Brayshaw takes the mark. Thank goodness for him.
Yeah.
Plays on the wing, plays in the middle, plays down the back line, plays up forward. We simply didn't have a replacement in this game, and he was a huge loss all round. We lost more than just one player. We lost a whole stack of other ancillary sort of positives that Brayshaw brings to the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a good point, George, about his defensiveness. We really, that's something that it's hard to sort of see until you watch the replay about how clever he is of sagging back. And, he reads the play so well, Gus, that he's not particularly quick, but he's one of those players because he reads the play so well, he can get to spots where he needs to go. But as I said a bit earlier, if we were talking last week and said, well, what are our chances of beating the supposedly best team in the competition with losing Gus 3 minutes into the game and having his replacement only spend 50% time on the game and racking up 5 possessions, all three of us would have said, well, we don't think we're going to win that game of footy. And we were in it. So it was a huge impact. And as I said, I have no doubt it psychologically rattled the players a fair bit. And to be honest, have you guys heard Track's interview?
Yep.
The couple of days after,
yeah.
He still sounds rattled. Yeah. He repeated a couple of times. Well, once he said, Gus is one of his closest mates, and he was asked about how he is, and he sort of went to go for a cliche and eventually said, "Oh, not good,
not great."
Yeah, I mean, it was. It's human nature for them to be rattled, particularly the young kids, So it was an awful, leaving aside the noise about Maynard, it was such an awful thing to see as a fan. I can't begin to think how distressing it would have been. This is a group of players a group of young men who openly say they love their teammates. It's something that Goody has been, credit to Hardwick. He really forwarded that whole thing about cohesion and emotional vulnerability and that connection between players. To see of all players, Gus prone on the ground like that, I'm amazed they played the way they did for the last 3 quarters. So, for me, it was the defining part of the match. And I'm, again, amazed that more people aren't sort of making that point.
It's particularly telling, and people forget Brayshaw was unconscious apparently for a full minute.
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
And
2 minutes.
And these guys are 20.
It's like a car crash.
Yeah, these guys are 20, 25. They've never seen things like this before, even though they've been playing football for years. There is a serious question coming into their minds. Wow, this is something really serious and could be really dangerous for Angus as he's lying prone on the ground there.
Exactly.
Particularly with his history as well.
Yeah, and when you're as old as the 3 podcasters here, you've probably seen this situation plenty of times over your lifetime. But these guys are 20 and 25, and it's a shocking experience for them. They've never seen this sort of thing before. So,
this doesn't. That's the other thing that drives me nuts about this. This talk about a football act. I've watched. I don't know how many games of football I've watched. I have not seen an incident like that. So if it's a football act, why wouldn't I see that more often? I haven't seen a player laid out like that. I can't remember. I remember Carl Dittridge laid out someone.
If you watch...
And I remember Steve's. I was just talking about it actually when I went to the footy with Weber, is when I saw at Princess Park Lee Matthews round arm Steve Smith and knock him into next week. I'm not saying that Maynard that was intentional in the same way, but that's. That, in the 80s, seeing a player getting smashed and dropping, you saw it. But, how often do you see that incident now? And as you say, how many of these young fellas would have seen it in a game of footy? Their mind would have leapt to, maybe Gus will never play again. That's where my mind still is. So how do they concentrate on a game of footy,
Well, while we're on the subject of Gus's concussion, we should probably discuss Maynard and any, if any, suspension he receives. The media has already acquitted him and certainly have put their barristers' wigs and gowns on to go to bat for him. Supreme Demon says First off, I'm still reeling from this disappointing loss. I'm angry and bitter. What a despicable dog act by Braden Maynard on Angus Brayshaw. How many weeks do you think Braden Maynard gets suspended for? He simply cannot be allowed to get away with what he did. Lazy says, does the football media need to be held to a higher standard? In the 24-hour news cycle and Twitterverse, have we allowed this to become too much of a free-for-all where serious issues like concussion and CTE are concerned? In the Aaliyah and Jones collision, we had ex-players like Corns defending medical staff and inadvertently, in my view, playing down the seriousness of this issue. We've now got ex-players saying that Maynard's act was a pure football act and some even suggesting that Brayshaw should have protected himself better. Concussion and CTE is a serious health issue that is transcending the expert game knowledge and commentary of ex-footballers. I believe these figures have a platform and with that a responsibility to provide is to not provide misinformation and headlines that could influence the public and players at lower levels in a negative way. Does this field and this subject need to be better regulated in the media? Now, Nudge has sent a fifth voicemail. A Nudge, that's 10 minutes now worth, just saying, concise. Anyway, here's
concise
Nudge.
You and I need to go to concise school.
You really do. Here's Nudge on Maynard.
Hey, gents, Nudge again. So sorry to bother you again, but I've had a few hours at work to digress, reset, and it's hit me. Something's hit me that I think I really want your opinion on. I was listening to Gerard Whateley finally make some sense today. He's been off the ball for a while, Gerard, but he's made some sense this morning, talking about Maynard and that, the suspension is 100% valid if it does come, and that he was staunchly against Kane Corns' view that only people who don't play football should be knocked out. Think he should be rubbed out, sorry. Dermot Brereton as well said the same thing, that he braced and his secondary thought was to bump, which is absolutely right. And we all know, anyone that's played footy at a high level understands what happened and that it's a dog act.
Yes, so Big Man, will Maynard be suspended? Will he get off on appeal? Will they suspend him knowing that he'll likely get off on appeal and therefore they can wash their hands of it and claim that they tried to be tough on head-high contact, but it was taken out of their hands? How do you think this is all going to play out?
How do I think it's going to play out?
Yeah, I gather you think he should be suspended and
I do,
and miss 2 weeks at least, so he misses a grand final, because that's the biggest suspension you can give him. Forget 10 weeks or 6 weeks or 5 weeks. 2 weeks is.
For me, there's two things. So there's the media stuff and all of that noise, but just get rid of all of the white noise for me. That's the thing. Get rid of everything. Get rid of the drama. Get rid of the fact it was Gus. Get rid of, Bra or whatever they call him, or Brazza. Get rid of the ridiculous thing that he goes around and brings a bottle of wine and of course magically the media find out about that. I mean, come on, if you really care about the fella, you do that, and so no one knows. You don't virtue signal to the whole league, and you don't, forget the fact that Channel 7, which is I'm just so ropeable about, interview him on the ground. It's just everything that's wrong with the coverage of AFL football and the parasitic, symbiotic relationship between the media and the AFL. Barrett, for instance, personifies. Forget all of that. And it was a reportable incident because he chose to bump when he had another option. The rules are clear. It's not a new novel charge. He left the ground. He had the option to do other things other than bump. He chose to turn his body and flush Gus with his shoulder to the head. So that's no different to Cozzy jumping at Smith. Once he left the ground, contact was inevitable. Cozzy had other options other than turning his body and getting Smith in the head. Cozzy got 2 weeks for that. Smith jumps up and goes on and plays on, right? So for me, there isn't actually any grey. It's not really particularly novel. It's just the only novel part of it was as a smother. But the bottom line is that he had the option not to bump. He chose to bump for whatever reason, to protect himself or whatever reason. It doesn't really matter what the reason is. And he got Gus high. And that's what that whole MRO grid is and whatever it is. And on that, he gets 3 weeks. It's careless and it's a obviously high impact. It's 3 weeks. There's no real, like the rest of it's just white noise. The media want to, drill into it. They just want to make a song and dance out of it. But there's no grey. It's 3 weeks. I don't see how it's any different to, for instance, De Goey. Do you remember when De Goey elected to run past the ball? Yep. And completely knocked out that young West Coast Eagles player? Now, everyone was saying, well, that was a football act. He went for 3 weeks or whatever it was, 2 or 3 weeks, because he elected to bump. And as soon as you elect to bump, you take the duty of care on the player. And if you accidentally, De Goey accidentally hit that young West Coast player in the head with exactly the same part of his body, I might add, his shoulder. He turned, braced and hit him, braced for contact. He got 3 weeks. Didn't matter. It was an accident. He got 3 weeks because if you elect to bump and hit a player in the head, you will be reported. So I don't see why this is any different, to be honest.
It's actually quite simple because tackling is a football act, and yet you can be sent off for weeks if someone's hit in the head as a result of your tackle.
Of course, sling tackle is a football. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So no difference. It's irrelevant what happened. It might have been in the act, but the consequences are that Gus is probably going to be out for a couple of weeks.
Or maybe longer.
The other interesting thing was posted a shot on Demonland today of Cozzy in this particular game doing a similar sort of jump up in the air and completely missing the oncoming player.
Hoskin Elliott. Yeah. He ran straight at Hoskin Elliott and pirouetted out of the way. That's right. Yeah. Exactly right.
It's about choosing to continue with it.
Yeah. And so their argument will be, and I've heard this already, is that Maynard had no other option. He was right to protect himself. He's allowed to protect himself. But as I said in that De Goey example, like that was the same deal. He braced for contact. He had another option. There was a poster on Demonland who had a pretty amazing post, actually, Speed Demon, and I won't go into detail about what he said, but he said if you were falling on your daughter, like your 8-year-old daughter, and you tripped and you were falling towards your daughter, and your thought was, I don't want to hurt her, would you turn your body and land on her with your shoulder? You wouldn't. You would do the natural instinct if you're trying to protect someone as you're falling towards them, or even protect yourself, is to put your hands out and put them across the chest. That he could have done that, and Gus still would have been injured probably. Maynard wouldn't have been. He was coming from 6 feet in the air or something. So his instinct was to protect himself and not worry about Gus. And so this idea that he turned his body to protect himself is some sort of way out of this. It just doesn't fly. And as I said, it doesn't really matter. The rules are the rules. It's clear. If you choose to bump and you hit him in the head, you go.
All right. Well, we know rules are rules, but this is the AFL. How do you think this is going to play out? And it's obviously probably, if this was round 2, it's going to have a different. It's going to have a different result than it would have been.
I don't know. Well, one thing is that I can't. It makes me just sick to the stomach because I want to listen to footy shows. I want to watch footy this week. Melbourne are playing finals, but I honestly have not been able to turn on one football media because I can't stand the thought of hearing a tosser ex-footballer who's likely to have CTE themselves say it I just can't deal with it. So it's ruining my experience of footy. What will happen? I think he'll go. It's probably happened already. I don't know.
It's tomorrow.
Is it tomorrow? Why is it not tonight? Isn't it normally Monday night? Well, he'll go. They'll appeal. He'll go still, and it'll be upheld, and then it'll be appealed again. That's how I see it going. Will it get off? Well, if it gets off, I mean, the AFL, there's talk of $1 billion group, what do you call it? I don't know. When there's a group of players suing the AFL at the moment, there's something I read today on Demonland that there's 25 current players suing the AFL. The other overlay on this is that it's so gut-wrenching. Danny Frawley died on Saturday. The anniversary of his death was on Saturday. Gus's fiance, or did they get married?
It's definitely his fiance. I'm not sure.
Fiance is Danny Frawley's daughter. As I understand it, Danny Frawley's family are in legal litigation with the AFL. So, the point I'm sort of a long way around to getting to is sure, there might be this incredible media pressure to let Bruz off and let him play, because he's the victim in all of this, of course. But it's going to be crashing into a pretty serious legal liability question and the future of the game in terms of its viability, I would have thought. You can't be – what sort of message would this send? The other thing is, what sort of message would this send to all the people watching it that Bruz gets off while Gus is, he probably won't play again this season, I wouldn't think.
The one positive to come out of it all is that Laura Kane, the new general manager of football at the AFL, finally came out and basically said, we're sending this straight to the tribunal. There was no opportunity for the MRO to assess it. It was just...
Was that
no.
The
MRO
suggestion
did.
Was that the MRO was going to let him off.
Yeah. Which is another issue. Christian's an ex-Collingwood player, and how you could not... I mean, that may not be true, but that's the talk, isn't it?
There's a lot of media outlets making that call that that was the case, but...
Yeah. So, but the MRO, it's a joint Christian Kane. It sounds very Cain-enabled, doesn't it? It sounds very religious. It hasn't gone to it's gone to the tribunal with a charge, which is, isn't it, careless and head high and
rough conduct.
Yeah, severe impact or impact high.
Yeah, it's 3+ weeks.
3 weeks.
Yeah, at least.
I've got a mate who's a D's fan, and we were debating this. He reckons that there should be – it's unfair, like a preliminary final should be worth 2 matches. It's like, so if he gets 3 weeks or 2 weeks, he should be able to play in the grand final because the prelims were worth 2. So if he's listening, I can't come at that one.
That's ridiculous. Let's go. Let's move on. Supreme Demon also has a question about Mason Cox. Should Mason Cox's vile acts of intentionally trying to injure Melbourne players come under scrutiny? What he attempted to do to Christian Petrarca's leg was disgraceful. Georgia, your thoughts on Mason Cox's rough antics against the D's? He was jumping into Max all night. We knew that was going to happen.
Yeah, we've talked about this as well, in other areas. But the sliding in to Petrarca, that happened right in front of me. That was horrible to look, and all the Demon fans around us were holding their collective breath when Petrarca's on the ground holding his knee. That could have been something, could have cost the guy the next season with another ACL. It was just reckless how there was no charge made against. It was just a straight out reckless slide into the opposition to take them out. But we've spoken about the knee at the first bounce that he started off with Max. There are other subsequent ones, plenty of round arms to the head in the ruck contest with Max, but there doesn't seem to be any retribution for it. Nobody's bringing up anything about it, but and the reason I suspect he's doing it is because he's getting away with it.
Yeah, well, that's the rub. All right, let's move on. Track Forever says, hi, guys. This one still stings 24 hours on, and I feel as though we missed out on something big here. I just wanted to highlight the amazing job A and B, that's Alex Neil-Bullen, did on Dacos. He had 17 possessions and kicked a goal compared to Dacos's 14 touches, but kept him to only 4 possessions in the first half. A&B is the ultimate team player who played his role to perfection on Thursday. Big man, you nailed it when you said not to get 4 goals down and we would come home with a wet sail and run all over them. You should be called Nostradamus. You pretty much said look out from halfway through the third quarter. Bravo. Big man, you're a big fan of Nibbler. He had a great game, and yes, you may take a bow for that prediction, but not for the result.
Yeah, it's on me. Nibbler had a great game. He had a fantastic game. He basically took Josh Dacos out of the game. So Josh Dacos was the 44th ranked player in this game with a -3 player ratings down with Dacos, Van Ruin and Elliott. He only had 14 disposals. Josh Dacos only had meters, only 360 meters gain, which is, he's huge. That's I don't know what his season average is. I'd be guessing it'd be up around 500 because he's a winger. A huge part of the way they play. He only had 1 clearances, and remarkably, Josh Dacos, one of their best kicks, only had no score involvement. So massive performance from that perspective from Nibbler. On top of that, Nibbler himself, he again, knocked it out of the park with pressure. He had 24 pressure acts, 48 pressure points. His season average is 45.8, so above his season average again. Just on that, Ollie again was our top pressure player, remarkable. Cozzy second, Nibbler, Track, and then Sparrow, and then Gorney. So huge game from Nibbler. Just a funny story is that I was yelling out quite a bit, "Go Nibbler, well Nibbler," and where I was sitting was up against the it was a Melbourne bay, and in the Melbourne, the next bay over was a Collingwood bay, and there was some fans that were trying to engage, and as you can imagine, some Pies fans, and they just seemed thrilled with me yelling out Nibbler because they just found it hilarious. They were yelling, "Nibbler, I'm gonna get it." I don't know what a nibbler is in fishing term, but I'm thinking it's some sort of bait, and but it seemed to appeal to them.
Isn't a nibble a bite on the
yeah. So I wish I had my stats. I would have said, yeah, well, he's given you Joss Dacos a bath. So he did have another huge performance, and he's been awesome for the last 6 or 7 weeks, Nibbler, and he's getting the love he deserves a bit from the commentary, and not criticised on Demonland very much. So there's a lot of people seeing a lot of love. Well, maybe not love. There's a lot of middling, grudging respect for Nibbler.
Well, we've talked about average foot skills of the media. So Red and Blue Rising says our midfield have really average foot skills, and this was highlighted on the big stage. The amount of times Fritsch, Rue, and even T-Mac were in good positions for a mark and failed to kick to advantage, really cost us. Wouldn't mind seeing how Bowie in the middle and give Rivers more time there. Thoughts? Thanks. D for Life adds Pies generally cleaner with the ball and get better entries as often on the break into clear forward line. Also side bottom, excellent passes were a highlight in the first half for the Pies. Demons not so clean with the ball, lots of entries into crowded forward line, but we still have multiple shots on goal where we should have done better, probably left 18 points slip in the fourth quarter alone. George, do you see a problem with disposal efficiency of our midfield and is it costing us?
Yeah, they're not very good kicks, as Ben Matt said.
Well, just disposal efficiency was terrible on the night, just in total. Yeah.
But we've spoken about this before. Collingwood's best kicks are the side bottoms and the Pendleburys and the Dacosses, and our best kicks are probably the Salems and the Bowies off the back line. So it's not surprising that kicking into the forward line isn't done by our more skilled kickers. But remember, it was also in the wet, so that didn't help at all because that even exacerbates and it certainly highlights the lack of elite kicking that we do have in the side.
So ironically, though, our kicking to goal really was the problem. Our shooting at goal, because in fact our disposal efficiency, it's hard to believe this, Andy, but our disposal efficiency was better than theirs on the night. 66.2% our disposal efficiency against theirs at 65.2%. And our kicking efficiency, which is our weakness obviously, was only a touch below theirs. It was 59 to 63. So our kicking efficiency was actually not bad, and this really surprised me from the stats as well. And so the problem with obviously kicking anywhere but for goal is that you turn the ball over more often and you get hurt on turnovers. But we only had 4 less intercepts than them, and we only had 2 less intercept marks. And as I said before, they didn't smash us in turnover. We scored it was 40 points. They scored 40 points from turnover. We scored 25. So they scored 15 points more on turnover, which is not far off the margin, I guess. But if we'd kicked even half decent from those turnovers, we would have matched them easily for the points they scored. So our kicking actually was comparatively good. It was okay on the night, except for shooting for goal.
Let's get to the next one. It's we've got a bit on tactics, corridor use, pressure, nullifying rebound, running in waves, speed of ball movement. So we've got a couple of those tactic questions. I'll lump them all together, and perhaps, B-Man, you're our resident tactician. You can take them on. At the break of Gorn says, does Goodwood need to instruct the players to use the corridor more? We ranked 18th from use of the corridor, and it's robbing us opportunities for really good looks. There was a great segment on this on First Crack on Saturday night. I feel it must be tweaked for Friday. Nairobi Demon has a few points to make on pressure, rebound, and running in waves. What happened to our pressure? Finals demand pressure, and so does our game style. Can we win with an average pressure of only 176 like last week without hitting the levels of 200 for at least some quarters? And from who and where on the ground do we need more pressure? What was our plan to nullify their rebound off half-back? This is critical to the way that we play, but our small defensive forwards seem to be missing in action, and our entries into our forward 50 seemed very shallow, particularly in the first quarter. Or so, enabling them to waltz it out of defence and rebound multiple times in the first quarter. If they had missed some gettable set shots from these rebounds, they would have been much further ahead in the first quarter. Where's the running in waves that we saw in previous seasons and the faster ball movement we saw at the beginning of this season, including our better kicks such as Bowie, Hunter, Salem, etc., taking on the corridor? As at the break of Gorn pointed out above, there were opportunities to move through the corridor and move the ball more quickly, but we often opted for the safety of moving along the boundary line and slowed down our movement into forward 50, allowing them plenty of time to set up defensively. Do you think we lowered our risk profile too much because of the weather, which didn't seem to be as wet as predicted earlier in the week? Really frustrating and emotionally draining game on many levels. I really hope Gus is okay, and thus very much looking forward to your excellent podcast, and thankfully the weather looks perfect for our game against the Blues. It's time for another ask. Is speed of ball movement the missing key? The last few games, it really stood out that we were kicking into a far more crowded forward line much more often than the opposition. It appears to be because the dynamic speed of ball movement we had at the beginning of the season has gone, enabling opposition teams to get back and choke our forward 50. We seem to consequently have to kick from further out and on more acute angles or attempt snaps closer in under great pressure, which has led to our goal kicking accuracy dropping off a cliff. It was clear at the beginning of the season that our speed of ball movement had improved significantly, and after a summer of goal kicking practice and set shots closer to goal, our accuracy went through the roof. Do you agree this is a key issue, and can we fix this in time? So, big man, a lot of tactics and strategy questions to unpack there, but you're the perfect man for the task. Take it away if you can.
Well, in some ways, I've covered a fair bit with the method, but what I'd say is that that's right. I agree with the speed on the ball comment completely. It's a function of the way we play, and the irony is that the more we dominate teams, the harder it is for us to get the speed on the ball. So what we actually want is, when we're playing these better teams, is something like 55-45. So I agree with that comment about the first quarter. Is that was our opportunity, because it was 55-45 the other way. It was 45% time in forward half for us and 55. That was our opportunity, and that's when the ball was in transition. So that means when it's 45, if it's 50-50, it's basically bouncing from one half to the other. That's when there's speed on the ball. That's when when there's fast transition. But for the rest of the match, it didn't drop below. None of the quarters dropped below 67%. So it was just camped in our forward half. Well, that's the challenge. So we want Carlton, for instance, to match us for time in forward half so that we have the opportunity to rebound from the back half. Now, that goes into the method question. Could we generate more stuff? Could we set our defence a bit higher? We could have done that, but that's not the way we play, and it's a bit late in the day to be, retooling your method at this stage of the season. I agree with that comment, actually, about whether we actually were thinking it was going to be wetter than it was, because it stopped raining. The ground was still pretty heavy. I have to say, being at the ground was still pretty wet. But the rain pretty much stopped before the game started. So we could have been braver for sure in that first quarter. There were opportunities in the middle to take them on. I wonder, again, I've said this a few times, but I just think they were rattled in that first quarter. So I just, if you're rattled, you're not as switched on as you need to be, and you miss those corridor kicks. But I agree, that was our opportunity to be attacking. And the thing is, if we could have got a 3-4 goal lead, what then happens to the match is that, and which is why it's so important to start fast, is that to catch up, the Pies need speed on the ball. So if we ever get a 2-3 goal margin, in order for the Pies to have got that back, they would have to attack and get speed on the ball. So I wonder whether McRae was happy for the game to be slow and be a forward half footy for us. George picked it up before, and there was, in one of those questions that you were reading before, Andy, someone mentioned it. I think the Pies are happy for it to be camped in their back line. They're confident in their ability to defend with the ball, as we are as well. So I agree. We want speed on the ball. We'll see speed on the ball. You know, in dry conditions, in a game that's evenly matched, we'll see speed on the ball. But when we smash teams, we won't see speed on the ball. So it's a bit of a catch-22, I think.
Let's talk about the crowd. Red and Blue Rising says, to my eye, we got overwhelmed by the massive crowd and even our stars struggled to get their hands on the pill early. Raskability says, the Pie fans seem to be mostly angry, aggressive, horrible, disgusting people. I'm so happy I'm not one of them. Well, I got to the game early, and I must say it was frightening walking around the ground level of the Shane Warne stand, and it had a bit of the Moss Isley Spaceport written all over it. You'll never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. And I believe that's the quote from Star Wars. So, fancy the Collingwood supporters chanting Collingwood whilst Brayshaw is knocked out. God, I hope we get another shot at them. But I don't know if they're just loud or what, but they seem to vastly outnumber us. So much for the 50-50 allocation and neutrals getting on the Ds. When we kicked that goal to be 7 points down late in the game with still enough time on the clock, it was really silent. It wasn't, it didn't have that same, like the game against Brisbane where the crowd was up and about when we got within a few goals. George and B-Man, George, I'll ask you, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, a couple of times they tried to start up their Collingwood chant, and basically they shut up pretty quickly as Melbourne came back. So having them quietened was only a good thing. But yeah, like you, when you arrive at the ground and there's all these strange people walking around, I'm reminded for the intelligent Melbourne listeners to this podcast of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, where people are classified according to their capabilities, and the Collingwood fans always remind me of the Epsilons. So go and check that one out in your Google, and you'll see what I mean.
I liked my Star Wars quote, by the way. The sub, we've man, you went early with this one, but Salty sent in a voicemail in regards to playing Laurie as the sub. So let's.
Right, I didn't listen. Sorry, Andy.
No, I didn't send. I send the boys the clips. I didn't send this week. So here's Salty.
Hey boys, Salty here. Pretty flat weekend. I'm sure you all had it as well. That was easily the most frustrating, depressing game I've ever been to, and I've been flat all weekend. I'm sure you have been as well. I also feel like we made a mistake in playing Laurie as the sub. I don't know why you'd ever play a small, low possession player, especially one, and also that one so inexperienced as a sub. We played Spargo as a sub earlier in the year. I think it was against Port in the wet. Horrible decision. Did nothing. So same with Laurie this game. I don't know why you wouldn't play James Jordan. I think James Harms has done a hammy, but James Jordan or someone big body, bit of experience made so much more sense. And I reckon we really missed a trick there. That Laurie's played 3 games, low possession. I don't know what we're doing there. I think that was a really, really bad call given the conditions. Keen to hear your thoughts. Trying to remain positive, but I just don't know how we're going to win Carlton, Brisbane, whoever. I think it's a really tough ask. Please cheer me up. Thanks. Bye.
So, B-Man, you've had your thoughts on this. So, George, what are your thoughts on Laurie as the sub?
I think I think I said this last week. Didn't really want him as a sub, and that was based on his statistics at Casey the previous couple of weeks. I don't know why he was selected. Jordan was a better option for me, or Spargo. Spargo had a fantastic game in the last game that he played at Casey, and while he did okay in the previous finals game that he played in, it was completely underwhelming in this game. 5 disposals for the whole game, as somebody pointed out. 3 more disposals than Gus.
Yeah, and the thing about, I could see the logic of Laurie because they did it the previous week, that you then bring him on as a tactical sub who can add a bit of speed and sort of inside 50 delivery in the last quarter. I would have gone with Spargo. But actually, on reflection, I agree with Salty, is that the thing about the sub is that he only comes on late in the quarter if you've got no injuries. And as it turned out, we had an injury, and so we were forced to bring a sub on. And so our super sub from, in 21, JJ was, he would have been ideal for, obviously they don't know that they're going to lose Gus, but he would have been ideal replacement for Gus. And I totally agree actually with Salty's point about even if he was to come on late, the thing is he hasn't got quick leg speed, so that's probably a negative on him, on JJ. And it is a bit of hindsight, obviously, because we now know that Gus was down. So if not Spar, I could in hindsight, I would have loved to have been JJ, but I would have gone with Spargo ahead of Laurie, in part because he's been there, he's done that, he's played in the grand final, he knows what he's doing. It's going to be interesting. We will talk about selections in a sec, but JJ, someone asked in the stats file thread, and Willow got back to them that about JJ's pressure ratings, and if you look at their minutes per game and stuff, time on ground, JJ's pressure rating is about the same, almost exactly the same as Brayshaw's. So one, in hindsight, he would have been brilliant for this game, but I hope they select him for Friday.
I think you got to select a sub based, what happens if early on in the game we lose someone.
Yeah, well, that's right. And, well, we were exposed a little bit because Laurie's not flexible. Particularly, I thought it was really curious. I don't know about what you guys thought about why he didn't get any midfield minutes. Like, he played at Casey the whole year as a midfield pretty much. And then we bring him in as a high half forward, as that's the role he's come in as a sub. So 51% game time in a game where you lose Gus, at the 3-minute mark of the first quarter. Not much confidence by Goody in him, I have to say, and not running him in the midfield at all, I thought was a strange decision. Because then if they did, they could have put Track up forward.
Yeah, and then the other thing with JJ is that he plays multiple roles.
He could go to the halfback flank.
He could go halfback. He's played wing,
half forward at a pinch.
Goes in the middle. I thought he provided a lot more. Would have thought he would have provided a lot more options. And if you're playing someone as a sub, particularly a tactical type of sub, Laurie can only play in one position.
Yeah, well, and midfield, and they didn't play him in it.
Yeah. So,
he's, as I said, Casey's been a mid pretty much all season.
Yeah.
And didn't get any midfield time. And I don't know, what was your thought, George, about them not at least trying Track up forward? And
it was hard to see it during the game. I don't know that it would have done a great deal because Collingwood were defending so damn well, and we needed him in the middle to provide to get it in there in the first place. Difficult position.
Absolutely. I mean, and he was like our leaders were amazing in that last quarter. Like Track and Ollie were just incredible in that last quarter. So was Maxi. They
were dragging us to the line. We didn't. Yeah.
They were totally dragging us to the line in that last quarter. So with 5 minutes to go in the last quarter, Oliver and Petrarca had a combined 20 disposals between them, 15 contested possessions, but just in the last quarter, 6 clearances and 7 inside 50s between them in that quarter alone. And our 3 big dogs, Gawn, Petrarca and Oliver, for the match, they combined for 87 disposals, 54 contested possessions, 27 clearances and 26 inside 50s. I mean, you can't ask much more from your leaders, can you?
No, absolutely not. That's fantastic numbers. We've got part 2 of voicemail number 5 from Nudge, just about Destiny. It might be a bit too early to talk about this, but
it got me thinking about what I was saying earlier, and this being, the makings of a fork in the road moment for the footy club. This to me, and this is what I want your opinion on, boys. This to me has got eeriness of destiny, and it just has to be a Melbourne Collingwood grand final. It has to be. I had this feeling in the moment when it happened because, it just felt like it was going to be a Melbourne Collingwood grand final. It feels like destiny. So I love you guys' opinion on that if you think it is destiny and it has that feeling about it. If you've got that feeling on the night, if you've got it now when you think about it, D's pies at the G. It's going to happen. It's destiny. So MFC, SS be damned. We're coming. Go D's.
I'm with him.
It's a long road
It's got
until
that
then.
redemption. It's got that feel. I can feel it. I can feel the energy. Redemption.
Yeah, we've got 2 hurdles to get over before we can talk about redemption.
Hurdles.
In 2 weeks' time, when we're doing this podcast, then we can talk about redemption, and this is our redemption game. And
that destiny. I'm on board. I'm on board, Nudge.
I know you're on board, George. Is it our destiny?
I don't believe in it.
All right, well, there you go. Let's get on to changes. So after being knocked out by Braden Mader, Angus Brayshaw was subbed out of the game with concussion, and he's entered the mandatory 12-day concussion protocol, so he obviously is not going to be available to play this week against the Blues. We wish Gus all the best for a speedy recovery, and hopefully he will return to play the following week when we play the Lions at the Gabba. How do you like that bit of positivity?
That's very good work. That's on the destiny train.
That is. Inspired me. Yeah, Jacob Van Rooyen was rubbed out for 1 week for rough contact for his hit on Collingwood's Dan McStay. The Demons have accepted the charge and will not appeal, so JVR will need to be replaced this week, adding to the curse of the Demons forward line in 2023. In other injury news, Max Gawn did not train with the team at Sunday's open training session. I heard a whisper from somebody today that apparently he's still limping, so watch this space.
And I heard that Cox stomped on his foot.
Well, that might be why he's limping. And the foot's also been our Achilles heel this year. So,
pardon the pun.
Yep. Clayton Oliver as well did not train with the team at the open session. He posted a photo on Instagram yesterday, which was Sunday, with a big compression bandage on his knee. So I guess we have to watch that space too. Now, we won't deal with those hypotheticals in this podcast because there's been nothing official. And my MFC SS simply can't deal with such a scenario in a do-or-die match with my nemesis Carlton. However, we can deal with the changes that we do know that we have to make. So before I ask for your ins and outs, gentlemen, D for Life has some changes that he's proposed, and then we've got some voicemails as well. D for Life says, defensively, as McKay is likely out, bring in Turner. Lever plays miles better with the extra tall. Also with Rivers, McVee, Bowie, Hibbert and Salem, we can cover Carlton's small options and revert to only 2 talls in the back line if required, agreed or disagreed. Ins and outs, JVR for Grundy. Brayshaw, Grundy for JVR, Jordan for Brayshaw, most like-for-like available. Turner for Laurie unsighted, Turner helps out Lever. T-Mac, forward line was too tall and didn't take enough marks last week, so T-Mac, JVR and Smith talls replaced with Max/Grundy and Smith. If Smith or Grundy is not working, bring in T-Mac in mid to late third quarter. What are your thoughts? Thanks for the podcast. You guys are terrific. Now we've got a couple of, we've got 2 voicemails. I'll play back to back, and then Bin Man followed by George, who comes in, who comes out. So wait till Salty has done his voicemail.
Hi, this is Noah from Bentley again. Just a second question I wanted to ask the team. After the loss to Collingwood, you could clearly see having one ruckman, i.e. Maxi Gawn, play was clearly not a good decision by Goodwin. We really need the second ruckman. So the question I wanted to ask is, do you think they'll bring in Grundy? And I think they personally do, because they need to fight off some tall ruckman for Carlton, and we need someone to sort of rest the momentum, i.e. Gorney, when he's either playing in the back or in the forward. And that really didn't happen during the Collingwood game. As always, love the D's, and let's go and beat the Blues and get some revenge. Cheers.
Couple of things. I think Grundy's the right one to bring in this week. I'd play him a stay-at-home forward and just tell him to bring the ball to ground. T-Mac and Joel Smith just can't do that. So I wouldn't bring anyone else other than Grundy. Shaki's the other option, but don't like it. Too soft.
B-Man, who's coming
The first thing I'd say before about ahead of selections is that I reckon the media and Melbourne fans should just take a step back, because it's not panic stations. We're not going to suddenly drop 3 players or 4 players. A game that we played a very good team and, we smashed them for 3 quarters. And, how often can you get within 7 points, forget expected score, is that we gave them a 18-point handicap and almost run them down. So I don't expect any major changes. I think JVR out, to be honest, is I'm not quite sure what the right phrase is, but it's got an advantage because he was really hitting the wall tiring. I said his player ratings, but he's looking exhausted. Funny thing about the ruck, I think I hadn't really considered this during the week. I heard them talk, I forget which player it was, but that why the Pies, and I think it was in context of the Blues having 2 ruckmen, bringing Pitternet in actually, and saying, well, it actually in wet weather, it's better to have 2 ruckmen because you're going to have lots of stoppages, which hadn't really occurred to me. You think, well, you play, you want fewest tall players in the wet, but they were arguing, well, you need, 2 in the wet, ruckmen in the wet because of all the additional stoppages that you're going to have. And so, you want to be able to win them. And for the same reason, Cox and Cameron. I think for me, the selection, I don't think Grundy will get selected, and I think they missed their chance. For me, it was the game just gone because of, I think the second ruckman would have been helpful in the game just gone, but it's going to be dry on Friday night. I think T-Mac, he was reasonable. I think they'll leave him in. I don't think Grundy will play. I can't see that. I'll be surprised, put it that way. I'll bring JJ in for Brayshaw. And, there's I think Laurie probably gets dropped, but I'm not sure who comes in, but maybe Laurie back to – I'd bring Spargo in for JVR potentially, or at least at least be sub. I don't think they'll make any more changes than that. So who's out? It's Gus out and JVR definitely. I reckon.
Yeah, definitely.
So Laurie will I can't see Laurie getting selected he'll either be sub or out. I think Spargo will come in. Harmsy can't come in, I think, because he's done a hammy.
Yeah.
So I can see only the 2 changes. Who comes in as a second tall. Can't see Shaki coming in. I could see maybe just those 2 changes.
For me, I'd be bringing Grundy in again because of the 2 ruck situation. I will absolutely guarantee you Pitnet will target McGawn, particularly right from the start. Our next question is, who's our backup ruck and who's going to beat De Koning? The only other possibility we've got is T-Mac, and he didn't ruck at all last week, and De Koning will kill him in the ruck if we don't have a second ruck option. So that's why I bring in Grundy. He provides that additional backup. We lose JVR. That gives you another hole that's filled successfully. We've still got T-Mac in the side. We've still got Joel Smith in the side up forward. The one I thought might come out this week is actually Hibbert.
Sorry. Yeah, that's what I actually, you're right. That's what I was thinking because I think he's announced his retirement pretty much.
Well, he's announced his retirement, but the other thing to consider is he's got this ongoing Achilles problem. He's played a couple of games now. Now's the time if you're going to rest him, if he's going to be coming up against, let's say, Collingwood in the final. He's the man we need for Elliott. We don't want him to be playing 4 games in a row. Particularly. So the other option is I would thought Turner comes back in.
Yeah.
And Turner apparently in the scratch match they had played up forward, so it gives you options both as forward and back.
Yeah, and trained with the forwards.
That's right. And I can't see Laurie coming in, and I would have Spargo as the sub and JJ as the replacement for Brayshaw.
So Grundy in for JVR.
Yep.
Turner in for Hibbo. That's the other one. I reckon you're right. I actually thought Hibbo might have an injury that he can't get up for the final. I just thought the timing of him announcing his retirement was a bit weird.
Yeah. Either way, if he plays these games, he won't be able to play 4 games in a row. He hasn't done so this season.
And maybe maybe the thing about Hibbo's timing is to announce it now for exactly as you're saying, that so the boys know that he's not playing this weekend. They'll probably know that because it's horses for courses, that his only chance of getting another game, which I think would be his 200th, maybe is playing in the grand final. So we've got to win this week. And then, the prelim. I think it's the prelim is his 200. So, yeah, I agree. I reckon that's the other one. I think he comes out and Turner comes in. And Grundy, you could play him off the bench a bit, couldn't you? You could use him 50% as like an old school ruckman who comes off the bench with a bit of forward work.
Yeah.
Actually, you've sold me. Grundy, I can see him coming in and,
I've got one more selection, which is an absolute Monty that we should be looking at this week, and that's Kate Hoare.
Oh, she was awesome, wasn't she, in the first quarter?
In the forward line, yeah.
Where she kicked that goal, she would have had a first quarter of 4 goals, something like 10 possessions.
Everything we wanted, someone who can mark in the forward line.
Kick accurately.
Yeah.
Get up the ground.
Yeah, play up the ground as well. So.
Yeah. And McNamara could be handy in as well, the way her ability to get around and get the ball.
Hibberd would have to play all 3 games to bring up his 200th in a grand final.
Right.
He's on 197.
He might be marooned on 199.
That'll do.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into our preview versus the Blues. With the exception of Collingwood, the Blues are the media's flavour of the last few months, and the AFL and the media will be frothing at the mouth at the prospect of these 2 heavyweights meeting in the grand final in a few weeks' time. The Blues have won their last 10 out of 11 games, with their only loss in that period coming in a match in the last game of the season that had no bearing on their place in the 8. After leading by 5 goals early in the third quarter, the Blues were nearly run over by a fast finishing and inaccurate Swans. I hope that sounds familiar, and eventually held on to win by 6 points. The match included 2 favourable arc decisions for the Blues, and that might sound familiar as well. The D's and the Blues are won each head-to-head this season. In a lacklustre Friday night game in early June, the D's ran out winners by 17 points, keeping the Blues to only 44 points for the match. 71 days later, the 2 teams met again on a misty Saturday night in August. After a fast start by the Blues, the D's nipped at their heels all night and fell agonisingly short after a controversial arc decision favoured the Blues as they won by 4 points. Before I get your thoughts on the game, gentlemen, we have a couple of comments and a voicemail and a question from our listeners. I'm not sure we actually have a voicemail, but Sam6172 says, I'll keep it short and ask the question that is really the only one that matters. Can we beat Carlton with the team that we have? Thanks, guys. Spit Demon replies to Sam, yes, if we play like we did against Collingwood and kick straight this time, it should be enough to win comfortably. Before I get into about the break of Gorn, I'm just pulling up our podcast thread, because late in the piece, after I'd done all the notes, 3183D, who has called in a few times on the voicemail, has responded to Sam 6172's comments. So I'll give him. He says, I echo Sam 6172's feeling pretty flat still. The media have ridden us off, and not many give us a chance with our decimated forward line. What tricks could or should be pulled out of the bag to get us over a Carlton side that will be feeling very confident? It feels like when we played the Hawks in 2018, except this time we are the Hawks. At the break of Gorn says, I've just finished watching the replay. It wasn't as obvious to me at the ground, but I think the main part of the reason we lost is the coaches didn't anticipate some of the structural changes Collingwood implemented behind the ball. They held their defenders, particularly Moore and Quaynor, very deep. Perhaps it was the absence of Murphy or Moore for a few weeks, but Collingwood were pressing too high the last few weeks and were leaking goals out the back. They clearly worked on that during the bye. Even when our players created a forward half turnover, Moore was always there in our defensive 50. Our coaches were too slow to react to this, and I didn't think any meaningful action was done to bring their defence higher. Perhaps bringing up JVR, Smith and McDonald higher up the ground, isolating Cossie, even isolating Track if that was an option. Collingwood was successful isolating Elliott, but unfortunately for them, he couldn't kick straight and Hibberd was huge. I agree at times we bombed it in and didn't try and bring up the Pies defenders, but I think one thing we're overlooking is the smart and strategic coaching by Collingwood to hold their defenders back. They were excellent and we failed to adjust. So my question to Bimman and George is this: if Carlton employ a similar tactic and hold Wiedering really deep, what can our forwards and mids do forwards and mids do. When Carlton has their defence set, do we kick around and chip the ball to bring forward their defence, isolate Petrarca and encourage the other forwards to get higher? I feel that we had near to none genuine one-on-ones on Thursday. I haven't watched the second half of the Swans versus Blues game in detail, but I'm keen to see how Sydney got really good looks against the Carlton defence. So, B-Man, what do you think about at the break of Gorn's suggestion?
Oh, well, I read that actually a little while ago, that comment on the thread, and I reckon that's a really interesting point. That's right. He's right in what he's saying about how deep their defensive was set, and they've been set up high on that, like further up and giving goals out the back. So I thought that was really clever by McRae, and it was to do with our method. So it was sort of partly what I was suggesting before, is that I think to a degree he was happy for it to be camped in our forward line because a slow game meant that we weren't going to be able to generate overlap, run from the halfback flank and get fast ball movement. So to answer that last part of the question is I watched the Sydney game. And so going back to this question about Melbourne's method and everyone wanting to see leading lanes open up and, stop bombing it in and, get speed on the ball. That's exactly, to answer that question from Breaker Gorn, that's exactly what the Swans did to the Blues. The Blues started to really tire. They started to really run out of gas, and the halfback flankers for the Swans really started to get into that game. Goulden, I always forget his name, the Lizard, whatever his name is, they really started doing damage and moving the ball quick. So they played exactly the method that everyone's screaming for Melbourne to have played against the Pies. The Swans, they played that method. They played the Pies' traditional method, which the Pies didn't play, ironically, except for the first quarter. But that's how the Swans got into that game. You know why they lost that game? They lost that game because of their inaccuracy. Yeah. They lost that game because they kicked 14 points. They should have smashed Carlton. They should have won that game. And the reason they didn't win the game is because they kicked 14 points. What was the score in the end? It was 9 goals, 14, 23 scoring shots, 5 more scoring shots than the Blues to only go down by 6 points, using exactly the method that everyone's screaming for Melbourne to employ. That was my point before. Doesn't matter if you shit kick for goal. Doesn't matter what method you employ, you're going to lose. So the Swans should have won that match, to answer the question from Break of Corn. The reason they were able to generate good looks inside 50 and one-on-ones was the speed of ball movement off the halfback flank. They're the best in the AFL at moving the ball from the halfback flank, better than the Pies in some respects. And that's what we need to do on Friday night. It's exactly what we need to do. So I suspect we'll come out, actually, I'm hoping, because my sense part of that first quarter, I've talked about it a few times this season, I feel like Goodies tactically allows the opposition to show their hand and then responds. I think that partly explains our slowish starts, because he wants to be able to do that in the full knowledge that we will get going and roll over the top of teams at the end. I don't think that will happen on Friday night. I think we'll come out of the gates and look to attack like absolute crazy on Friday night. So I'm really looking for a really fast scoring, high transition first quarter from us, playing different to how we've been playing, how we want to play late in the game. Once we get on top of teams, I can see us coming out and trying that method. And if we do, we'll get that fast game. We need to turn this into a fast game. We can't have another battle of contests like we did in the last time we played them, and an arm wrestle, because, we need to put this game to bed early and force the Blues to chase us down. I don't know if you watched that game, George, but the Swans should have won that game. They were running, Blues were running on the spot.
Yeah. The other thing that was particularly telling in this game was the Swans had no forward line. Effectively, that they subbed Amati off, who was their major target up forward. They still had McDonald.
Marty couldn't catch a cold.
Yeah, they had McDonald still up there, but all their goals were totally dependent on the mids moving up and Papley, basically.
Yeah, and moving the ball quick, huh?
Yeah. I think Carlton's got some real holes down there in their back line that depended on, Curnow and Mackay kicking huge bags up the other end in order to keep them in the game. They were kept in the game the last time because it was pouring rain against us. and it became a hard slog the whole game. And apart from one, whether the ball was touched or not, we would have won that game. But in dry conditions, I think we would have been a long, long way ahead. And I think even in that game to use the expected score, we would have as well. But you've still got to kick straight, as the Swans found out in this game, and we've still got to kick straight when the opportunities will arise. But I think we'll get a lot more opportunities in this game than what we did in the Collingwood game or the previous game against Carlton.
Absolutely. And for anyone to go back to Break of Gawn's question, if anyone wants to know how to generate, those one-on-ones, have a look at that. Just watch the last quarter of the Swans-Blues game. Is that as the game got quick, the Blues were starting to tread water and were very, very lucky to win that, including those two arc decisions that went for them. They got some very, very favourable decisions from the umpires as well, I thought. I could look, positive binners, but I could see us really smashing the Blues, because this is a classic setup. I've followed this particular thing, particularly from a betting perspective. This game and the prelim often sets up as a big loss, because Carlton's bubble gets burst, then they'll put away, if we can get a margin on them with a quarter to go, they won't have any fight left. And so there's no incentive for them to kick on. So, I really hope that we come out and we go hard from the very get-go and put a margin on them. And if we do, they're going to struggle to pull that back. I think Martin's a massive, massive out for them. And, he'll get, even if he gets downgraded and he's still out for this match, he torched us last time. He was a massive factor, and really it was equivalent of what Hill did to us, I think. So Martin out will mean that we won't have that problem of, do we put McVee on Martin and expose him again to a really talented small forward? So I think that's huge, and I think it's really huge to shut those high half forward flank runners that they've got, Cotterill and Cunningham, and go with them. So this game sets up really well for the D's, and I just really hope we look to attack. And I can't wait to go to a game of footy where it's not wet and mucky, and let's hope we get a good game of footy.
Binman's PA, who I think used to be AF, says psychology is a big part of footy, and the modern game relies on an ability to work through your emotions. As Goody often claims, you need to be able to reset both in-game and from week to week. I think we'll take care of Carlton, but the main variable, if you like, is the psychological fallout from the qualifying final. If it can go one of two ways. Track said the players were obviously flat after the game, which was certainly mirrored by the supporter sentiment and my own emotions. Now, if we use that hurt and flatness, the second chance that we have, it could be the reset that we need to kickstart our way to a 14th flag. Backs against the wall, have to go to the toughest route now, like the Bulldogs in 2021, and missing Petty, Melksham, JVR, and now Gus, possibly forever, in brackets. But unlike the Bulldogs in 2021, who in my view, we had the measure of that year, if we can get to a granny against Collingwood, I reckon our guys would be supremely confident and want to make amends. The alternative, of course, is that we were rocked by Gus's likely retirement. We're a little bit banged up ourselves after a bruising qualifying final, and Carlton running on emotions like we were in 2018 with the crowd on their side gets it over us. In my opinion, we start the first quarter well, get a small lead and convert all of our gettable opportunities, and we won't be beaten. However, how much do you guys think the psychology of losing the qualifying final and losing Gus will play into the result this week? So, George, how much impact does the psychology of losing, the qualifying final and losing Gus have an impact, and how much will it affect us?
Losing Gus will have an impact. The other will have absolutely none. As Ben Man said, we will be coming out. Our whole season is on the line regardless in this game. We either come out firing or we go out. It's as simple as that. And everybody knows that. So what happened in the previous game, I don't think it will have any effect. But losing Gus will hurt us simply because he's a better player.
Big Man, any other thoughts on the upcoming match against the Blues, and should I be booking flights and accommodation for Brisbane right after we finish this podcast?
I 100% would be booking them, Andy. Like, seriously, it's destiny. I think Nudge is spot on. I mean, I know they went with possessed, but I'm going with destiny. Is that, look, again, I've talked a lot about over the journey about how I think that the betting market is the best objective guide for any individual match. Of course, it doesn't mean that the odds reflect what happens. So we started slight favourites for the Pies game, for instance. But basically that was a 50-50 game. That's how it panned out, 7 points. We're $1.67 favourite for this match. It's a bit of context. This is shorter than we were. I think we were $1.73 when we played them just a few weeks ago. That's on the back of Martin being out and Mackay, who didn't play against us last time, I guess, him being out. So they're two big outs for them. Obviously, Gus is a big out for us. JVR isn't such a big out on the numbers that he's been putting out, I have to say. So I think we'll win this game. And another match against really our big arch enemy over the last 3 years is Brisbane. Brisbane better than me, Andy. The weather's beautiful up there this time of year, isn't it? The dew goes away and there's no slippery ball. So, we've got a good record up there. So, I'd be booking those flights. In fact, I'd be doing it now if I was you.
Oh, yeah. With my MFCSS, you don't do anything before you don't put the cart,
I assume that's
before
what
the
you're
horse.
doing when you had to take a intermission amid podcast break. I thought that's what you're doing, going off to book your flights.
Yeah, up to the snow. George, anything else you want to add about this game?
No, that's more than enough.
All right, so let's get on to the AFLW. The Demon AFLW juggernaut continued on its merry way this week, crushing the GWS Giants by 77 points, following on from their 42-point win last week against the Magpies to open the season. Now, after 400 games played in the AFLW competition, the D's sit atop the ladder with 75.8% win ratio. The D's have played 66 matches and have won 50, incidentally the first team to get to 50 wins, and lost only 16 and have won the one flag. That's a fantastic record. Adelaide are second with a 72.1% win rate from 68 games. However, they have the 3 flags over the 7 seasons where there have been premierships up for grabs. George, you're our man on the spot for all things AFLW. You want to give us a bit of a...
Firstly, I was hoping this would be at the top of the show because everybody was so depressed at the start. This was the salve for the depression. As some of the Demonlanders noted during the week, watching this game was actually a healing, or to quote someone else, it was good for the soul. And indeed, with a 72-point win and the way that they won, it was fantastic for the soul and gave a lot of not just hope, but really good feelings about the way that this team's performing for the Melbourne Football Club. 72-point win, at AFLW level is just amazing. So we're starting to see some of the results of, firstly, the improvement in the player quality in the competition, but also a couple of the rule changes, the limitation of 60 on the interchange, and the longer quarters means that scoring has become more free and more open than what it has been in the past. The important thing for us in this game was it really highlighted our fitness and the quality of the players that we have. 7 goals in the last quarter, 7 goals in a game is extraordinary for an AFLW level match, but 7 goals in the last quarter was just fantastic. The other thing that really struck me was the versatility that was being introduced into the side, even at this early stage. We didn't have Paxi Paxman playing for us. We didn't have Gabby Colvin playing for us. We didn't have Fitzsimon playing for us. Didn't look like we were missing anybody in the side. Some of the performances were just fantastic. Lauren Pearce in the ruck really looked like she struggled last season. We'll probably only get 2 or 3 games out of her before she'd have a knee complaint. She's playing the best that she's ever played for us. Tyler Hanks, if I don't know what they're going to call it, but the best player in the competition would have to be Tyler Hanks at the moment.
The most natural footballer. She's
just amazing. 30 disposals in this game. These are limited quarters, remember, still compared to the men's game. 30 disposals, including 6 tackles. But also the rest of the players around her, some extraordinary numbers. Liv Purcell, like I said, she's one of my favourite players. 28 disposals. Sarah Lampard, 22 disposals, but 476 metres gained. Kate Hoare with 23 disposals, 5 goals, 420 metres gained, and 8 marks. Just off the scale, some of the
400 odd metres gained for a player who played predominantly as a forward.
As a forward, yeah.
That is serious work rate, isn't it?
Yeah. But what really interested me was during the game, Mick Stanier was playing players also all around the ground.
Gillard rucked, I think, for a little while.
Yeah, Gillard rucked, Campbell rucked, but he also brought Taylor Harris into the middle, not as a ruck, as a midfielder. He played Sinead Goldrick in the middle, probably for the first time I've seen that. There seems to be Sarah Lampard, who is normally a staunch defender and always has been. She was up playing up the ground, like I said, 476 metres for her, and she's kicked 2 goals in the game to boot. So it was just an extraordinary
goals too.
Just an extraordinary game all round. I really loved the opening though. The Giants kicked the first goal in about the first 30 seconds, and we responded in the next 2 minutes. Within the next minute, with 2 goals from Kate Hoare. But what I really liked out of those 2 goals, with both of them, were a result of Sinead Goldrick and Blaheen Mackin streaming down the ground. Do not get in the way of the Irish girls when they're running in a straight line, and the ball's just pumped from one end of the ground basically to the other, and Kate took full advantage of it a couple of times.
And George, they've both got that skill of the Gaelic players have that ability to jink left and right that really it puts off the tackler like every time.
Yeah, and it's quite amazing to watch. If you haven't watched the Gaelic game at all, you can only block. So in order to get around someone, you've got to be able to move sideways very quickly.
That's why it's so natural then.
It's so natural to them. And when they see an open space, they run.
Yeah, right.
They run straight, and that's great to watch in these players. So all round, the goals the GWS just fell apart in the end because they couldn't run with us, and as a result, we had goals coming left, right, and centre. Bannon had finished up with 3 again. She should have had 4. She ran too far with the ball. She decided she'd run half the length of the ground before bouncing it, which was unfortunate, but she still finished up with 3 goals. Kate Hoare 5. The other interesting thing I think that I spoke about last week about getting high scores on it, because it's going to be critical at the end of the season, given the way that the fixture's been fixed, where the good teams are playing each other less so than the bottom teams. We certainly got a good percentage boost again in this game. The Geelong had a huge benefit of playing Carlton, where they kicked 66 points to Carlton's 1 goal.
It was North.
Sorry,
North played Carlton.
Oh, that's right, North. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so they got a huge boost out of that. But we've done pretty well with a 72-point win. The interesting thing will occur next week. We're playing
the Cats, aren't we?
We're no. We're playing. Can't remember. I haven't got it in front of me.
Keep going. I'll get it.
All right. Yeah. Geelong. Anyhow, Geelong are playing North, so Geelong's 4th.
Bulldogs.
We're playing the Bulldogs, so we're second on the ladder. We're playing the Bulldogs, who are currently 14th. You'd think that the Bulldogs have been shadows of what they were previously. So you think we'll win that game. But Geelong, who are 4th, are playing North, who are 1st. Adelaide, who are 3rd, are playing Essendon, who are 5th. Collingwood, who I think are a very, very good side, are actually playing the Suns, who are 6th. So there's a good chance that the teams in the 8th, 3 of them are going to lose this week.
To have a 10-game season.
And a 10-game season, that's going to be critical. Exactly. So, and we've got the good percentage to boot. So all of those games won't be high scoring games, or teams aren't going to improve their percentages as a result of it. But there's a good chance that we may well do so. So we're looking really good at the moment. Like I said, we're doing it without players who a couple of years ago we would have said, let's say we're playing without Paxman and we're playing without Daisy Pearce. Or will we get over the line? Well, there's not a problem with it because we certainly are at the moment without those sort of players around anymore. Hopefully Paxi comes back in the next couple of weeks. I think it was a quad injury. Does
that mean she had 4 injuries?
Must have. Yeah.
So what they said a couple of times on the commentary that McNamara was coming back from a serious back injury. I thought she had an ACL.
No, it was back injury. She suffered. She had. I was in the weights room. She slipped when she had weights. When she was working out, slipped on a stair, I think, or something.
Right.
Like
okay.
That, and broke her back.
Right. I wonder why I thought it ACL, but I thought she was terrific, and she was previously. Correct me if I'm wrong, George. She was sort of predominantly a small forward, but she was everywhere in this game.
Played a fair bit in the midfield before. I think they're slowly reintroducing her because she's been out for 12 months, and certainly a back injury of that nature, you'd be a little bit careful about what you're doing. But she's starting to come back into the form that we knew her before.
And she can really use that quick step she's got to get space, and is quite an important link-up player. The other thing, just a couple of comments, was I really liked how Kate Hoare kicked the ball, her set shots. She really flat and drove it, and she was clearing 40 metres pretty well. I thought, I thought she was clearing 40 metres pretty well. The other thing, I totally get your point about I love watching the game. It was such a salve, if you like, and I really enjoyed the commentary. I don't know who the Geelong AFLW player who was one of the commentators, but she brought a real interesting insight to the game, and also, an insight about AFLW that I found really interesting. And Hartford, whatever his name is, was the other commentator, and was the third one. I thought it was, top shelf. Wasn't over the top. I learned stuff about the game generally and about AFLW specifically. And, just for me, it was refreshing to hear a commentary that I got something from, as opposed to feeling like bashing my head against the wall listening to Brian Taylor and, Hodge and that mob. So it was a thoroughly enjoyable game to watch. And the ground was in awesome condition. It was that point I was, talking about last week about playing footy AFLW on AFL standard grounds with stands surrounding it, and it happened to be a beautiful day as well up there too.
Anything else, boys, on that?
No, I think that's all.
All right, well, we are going to leave it there for tonight. We'll be back next week, hopefully celebrating a win and not having to worry about hopefully we're not worrying about securing tickets for a preliminary final, but only because we will win. We're also going to probably have to worry about airline price gouging and accommodation availability and affordability. If you want to listen to the show live, then please head on over to demonland.com on Monday night at 8:30 p.m. Thank you to our 5-star reviewers on Apple Podcasts. Thank you to Engorged Onion, Demon Ted in the USA, Dan and Callum in the UK. Thank you to our voicemailers, Salty, Noah and Nudge. Thank you. Also, your questions and comments are an integral part of the show. So thank you to our Demonland posters who submitted questions and comments. Thank you to D32, El Diablo 14, Melbourne, Leave It to Diva, Go Lordy, Freed from Kazaya, Spirit of Norm Smith, Supreme Demon, Bates Mate, KLV, Demon WA, D Old Fart, Monocular, D for Life, Weber, Surfer D, Gorn Hub, Demonized, What, Say What, Oh My D's, Lazy, Track Forever, Red and Blue Rising, At the Break of Gorn, Nairobi Demon. It's time for another Raskability. Sam 6172, Spit Demon, Demons, Binman's PA, and 3183D. And thank you.
And Andy in the chat room, big shout out to What Do We Sing? Terence, all the way from Belgium. G'day, Terence. Nudge, and Nudge.
Nudge again.
And I'm with you, Nudge. Destiny.
Destiny. Thank you to my co-hosts, George and B-Man. Thank you to you, our loyal listeners. Don't forget, leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we'll read it out on the show. Don't forget, check out our YouTube channel to watch the show. Just search for Demonland Podcast, and please like our videos and subscribe to the channel. See you next week. Go Demons.
Go Red Leggers.